Prologue. Hollywood will sell you anything if you let it. Money shows up in quiet ways first, paper checks, then wired digits, then neat stacks in padded envelopes that smell like ink and cardboard. The signatures at the bottom of the contracts might as well be carved symbols. Adults crowd around them like they're relics, proof that a wish has been granted. Fame arrives louder. It comes as camera flashes and shouted questions, strangers speaking your name like they own a fraction of it now. At 5, you don't understand what any of it means. You just know that when the lights hit you, the grown-ups smile wider. It feels like a cheat code. Like you somehow slipped past the line of kids auditioning in cramped hallways and landed right where everyone else is desperate to stand. The city leans in and whispers in your ear, special, chosen, untouchable. You believe it, because nobody tells you there's a cost. Nobody brings up the part where every wish has something waiting in the dark on the other side, holding an invoice. That's the piece they never print on the glossy brochures. Something always waits to balance the ledger. No legal team can draft a paragraph that protects whatever fragile thing you call a soul. There is no clause tucked in the margins that says, should psychological damage occur, the studio accepts full responsibility. You only discover the missing language once the ink has dried and the cameras have already taken what they want. Some people figure this out after a decade of premieres and red carpets. Some figure it out when the offers stop coming. Some, like me, get the lesson before they can spell the word industry. For me, everything sharpens into focus on a specific date, August 12, 1995. The day Monsters in the Closet officially hit theaters. On the calendars, it was just another summer release. On the call sheets, it was an ambitious little horror flick with big hopes and a small budget. In my house, it was the axis everything spun around. I was 5 years old, handed a leading role like it was a golden raffle ticket. Adults around me said phrases like, franchise potential, with the same hush people reserve for prayers. I didn't understand what that meant. I just knew the director pointed straight at me in a room full of kids and said, that one. Fate. That's what everyone decided it was. Fate, luck, destiny, whatever word made them feel less guilty about pushing a child toward a camera that would never blink. My parents cried in the parking lot afterward, clinging to each other, already talking about college funds and doors opening. Agents called me kiddo and ruffled my hair, promising the world. Nobody asked what I wanted. At 5, you don't know you're allowed to have a say. The boy I became on screen, Cody Heller, lived in a simpler nightmare. His world narrowed to one problem, the thing in his closet. Every night, he woke with his heart pounding and his skin prickling, convinced something moved just beyond the sliver of light under the door. Not vague monster shapes, not cartoon fears, but specific details, footsteps that stopped when he stopped breathing, the wet sound of breathing that didn't match his own, the deliberate drag of weight across old wooden boards. He counted them, catalogued them, learned their rhythms the way other kids memorize songs. Every morning, Cody reported the night's inventory to his parents. He described the sounds, the timings, the way the door would tremble almost imperceptibly as if someone, or something, rested its hand on the other side. His parents listened just long enough to smile and dismiss it. Bad dreams. Too many scary shows. Growing pains of a vivid imagination. They promised him there was nothing there, then walked out and turned off the light. The door always stayed closed. The darkness always stayed on the other side. The crew thought it was perfect. Good material, they'd say, watching the monitors. A kid who knows the truth. Adults who refuse to. They loved the tension built into that gap. They taught me to hit all the beats, eyes wide but glassy, breath hitching at the exact scripted second, lower lip quivering just enough to look real but not enough to ruin the take. They crouched in front of me between shots, demonstrating how to make my shoulders shake like I was holding back sobs. The first few times, my tears were real. Eventually I learned to fake them. The problem is, at 5, your nervous system doesn't fully understand the difference. Your body just knows it is scared, over and over, in the same room, facing the same door. The film's monster was not what people expected. There were no glowing eyes, no rows of teeth, no dripping claws. Just a man, Georgie Matthews Jr. A name you could imagine on a mail slot or a high school yearbook. In the story, he was a serial killer from San Francisco, the kind who moved through the city like a rumor. 7 victims over 6 years. Never quite caught on camera, never quite identified, always just out of reach. The script called him a phantom. The cops in the movie called him a ghost. The audience was supposed to gasp when they realized the thing in the closet wasn't supernatural at all. It was human. The director loved that angle. Real horror comes from people, he'd say to anyone who would stop long enough to listen. He said it like he was confessing a secret only he had discovered, smiling in that satisfied way of someone sure they've made art. To him, Georgie was a clever inversion of a trope. To me, Georgie became a shadow that didn't leave when they yelled cut. I was instructed to imagine him crouched behind the closet door, listening to my breathing. I did such a good job imagining it that my mind decided to keep practicing after work, in my real bedroom, with my real closet. The set closet was just plywood and paint, its darkness controlled by a switch someone off-screen operated. Real closets are not like that. They open onto unknowns you don't fully understand yet, attics, crawlspaces, shared walls with strangers. Once you've spent months pretending a man can fold himself into that kind of darkness and wait, it stops feeling like pretend. I started cracking my own closet door at home before bed, not because it made me feel safer, but because seeing the inside felt better than wondering what I couldn't see. In the film, the tension builds until Jodie's parents can't ignore the noises anymore. At first they brush it off with the same tired comforts. Then the sounds repeat. Grow clearer. Heavier. The floorboards complain under a weight that isn't supposed to be there. One night, the parents exchange a look, annoyance edged with unease, and decide to prove, once and for all, that nothing is in that closet. They pad down the hallway, half amused, half irritated, barefoot and unarmed. They flick on the light. The camera follows behind, tight on their backs. The audience knows what they don't. The music strips down to a thin, anxious note. The doorknob looms larger in the frame than their hands. When it finally turns, the moment stretches. Darkness spills from the gap with a kind of presence, like breath. Then Georgie is there, not with a roar, but with speed and precision. A flash of metal. A wet sound. The parents fall before they manage a full scream. Blood on the wallpaper, eyes still open. The adults called it choreography. They talked about prosthetics, about how realistic the blood looked, about camera angles and editing rhythms and impact. They high-fived when playback showed the kill clearly enough for shock but not so gory it would knock them into a stricter rating. They told each other the scene would be talked about for years. For me, it was just new imagery to pin to the inside of my eyelids. From the outside, it all read as bold. A horror film daring enough to center a small child in genuine danger. Edgy. Risky. The kind of thing that might break through the noise and make a splash. The industry loves that word, risk. It sounds heroic when they say it in interviews. What they never admit is that the risk is almost always outsourced. The fallout lands somewhere else. In this case, it landed in the nervous system of a 5-year-old taught that closets aren't safe and that fear, if performed correctly, earns praise. Everyone around me seemed certain monsters in the closet would hit big. They spoke in plural, sequels, spin-offs, deals. There was talk of action figures, lunchboxes, late-night show appearances featuring the brave little star. Apparently, if you suffer beautifully enough on screen, the world is supposed to line up to thank you. That was the promise, your fear will be worth it. The world declined the offer. The movie opened and slid straight past unnoticed. Theaters sat half empty. Reviews called it derivative, confused, mean-spirited, in the sanitized language of people who get paid either way. The box office numbers were not just bad, they were forgettable. No glorious train wreck, no so bad it's good afterlife. Just a faint splash followed by silence. By the time the second weekend rolled around, posters were already coming down, replaced by something shinier. Monsters in the Closet didn't even earn a proper flop. It simply evaporated. The studio shrugged and moved on to the next gamble. The director started chasing other scripts, other ghosts. My parents, faced with the wreckage of their expectations, doubled down. The next one will land, they said. This is just the beginning. But bargains you never meant to make don't vanish when the receipts disappoint. I was still the kid whose job had been to inhabit terror until it looked convincing. Still the kid who had learned, without anyone saying it aloud, that applause and dread can occupy the same space in your chest. You can't buy back the first moment you look at a dark doorway and feel, not think, feel, that something is waiting. You can't unteach your muscles the habit of tensing when a hinge creaks. You can't rewind years of sleeping with the closet open, not because you're brave, but because seeing the emptiness is the only proof you have that you're alone. Those are not the side effects they list when they talk about a big break. Agents don't warn you that in this town, the worst monsters rarely need makeup. They don't stalk through fog with knives in their hands. They sit across from you in temperature-controlled offices, well-groomed and smiling, pen poised above dotted lines. They tell you how bright your future looks. They never mention the shadows collecting just behind it. And they certainly don't tell you what to do when. 28 years later, on a quiet Tuesday night. Sitting alone in a grown-up apartment with grown-up locks and grown-up security systems. You hear that old, familiar drag of weight across wood from the other side of your bedroom closet. Followed by the soft, deliberate click of the door unlatching. Chapter 1, My Agent Gilbert Redder. How are you, Cody? He asked, lowering himself onto the plush velvet sofa tucked into the corner of my room. He sank into it like a man bracing for impact. He should have. I was drunk past the point of dignity, and the stench of cigarettes and something far worse hung between us like a loaded gun. The heroin made my skin crawl beneath my clothes, a constant itch that felt almost sentient. Fine, I slurred. He studied me with a blunt, clinical coldness. Really now? You look like shit. I barked a laugh. Look who's talking. His eyes narrowed. Hey, at least I'm not a 33-year-old junkie. That hit hard enough to sober a corpse. Fuck you, Gilbert. All you ever do is bitch and moan about how I used to be a child star. Gilbert leaned forward, a sharp grin cutting across his face. Well, guess what? They're making a 2025 remake of Monsters in the Closet. Looks like you weren't fully forgotten. Bastards. Why are you upset? This is your shot at getting back into acting. You could play the father. I snorted. Me? You're out of your damn mind. I pushed myself off the recliner, and the room instantly tilted, sending me staggering. Why not? You look old as shit. Perfect casting. Thanks. I lurched toward him, half aiming for a slap, but the floor won the fight and I crashed down hard. A moment passed. Then, quietly. You ever watch BoJack Horseman, Cody? That pierced the haze. That's my favorite show ever. I beamed, too brightly. Gilbert exhaled through his nose. Well, you remind me of BoJack more than anything. Sarah Lynn too. There was no cruelty in his voice, just a soft, misguided attempt at honesty. But his words landed like a blade, twisting somewhere deep. I didn't want help. Not his. Not anyone's. I can't help you if you're not willing to change, he said without any humor in his voice. Why the hell would I want to change? I slurred some more. Because you are a pathetic piece of shit, he roared. It was not easy to get Gilbert angry, but once you did, it was game over for everyone in the room. Oh, I shrank back into my lazy boy. Call me when you're not drunk, the movie won't flop this time. I promise, he reassuringly said. How do you know that? I asked skeptically, in utter disbelief. Because Lionsgate is producing this one, he grinned in the dim light of the kitchen. I spat out my coffee as soon as he said those words. Coffee was my only choice of stimulant right now, cocaine was exceedingly difficult to come by. Say what? I asked in pure disbelief. Yeah. Shooting begins in 2 weeks. Are you up for it? He asked me with a subtle nod. Sure, I mumbled. But you can't use heroin on set, he warned me harshly. Why the hell not? I asked, annoyed by his requirement. You will nod off during filming, and then every scene will take 10 times longer to film, he explained to me. I'll do it, I shook his hand as I stumbled over to him. You better keep your word, he demanded. Don't you even worry, I brushed Gilbert off. I'll see you tomorrow then, he said with a hurt expression on his face. I could tell that he was worried about me, but I never asked him to care in the first place. Gilbert? I asked as he was leaving my apartment. Yeah, he asked with a small smile. Thank you, I choked out emotionally. Anytime. Just remember the deal. If you fuck this up, no studio will ever hire you again, he warned me with dead seriousness. Understood. See you tomorrow then? I waved him goodbye as he left my place. See you tomorrow, he confirmed. And with that I got the best news in 28 years. I finally had something to look forward to. I just had to not screw up my opportunity. Because this was my final one. Chapter 2, Harvey Gilmore. I met the director of the remake of Monsters in the Closet, Harvey Gilmore, and I was immediately distrusting of him. I have severe unchecked issues with trusting strangers. I only accepted Gilbert as my casting agent after he promised that he would not screw me over. Well. If it isn't Cody Heller, he shouted at the top of his lungs as if I were the second coming of Jesus Christ. It was beyond embarrassing. That's me, I said through gritted teeth. I was hungover, and felt like downing more Jaeger to numb the pain. How are you? He asked as he patted my back. I just met the guy and he was already getting touchy. Weirdo. Honestly? Really fucking hungover, I said before realizing that there were children in the casting room. Better watch your language, he jabbed me with his pointer finger. It hurt like hell. I apologize, I mumbled. What was that? He asked me even though he heard me just fine. I apologize for the use of profanity, Mr. Gilmore, I spoke, half tempted to toss him into the nearest dumpster outside the studio. I held back. It was for the best. I appreciate it. Now, let's get your first scene as Jody Keller's father, he said a little too excitedly. He was clearly on cocaine or amphetamines, because he shook the entire time like an autumn leaf. You okay? I asked, concerned. It was ironic. An addict asking another potential addict if they were all right. Sure, just nervous, he lied through his teeth unconvincingly. Want a drink? I offered him one. No, thank you for the offer, he said, shaking some more. Let's shoot the scene already, the child who was cast to be Jody squeaked out. He's right. Let's shoot the scene already, he shook his head at the wasted time. He grabbed the camera and began shooting my scene. I was supposed to yell at Jody for believing his closet was haunted. I felt awful for it, but then I remembered how Hollywood fucked my life up. That brought out true rage in me. Jody, there is nobody in the closet. Get some sleep. You have school tomorrow, I ragefully performed my lines. Whoa! Gilmore said in terror, backing away from me. He really thought I'd beat him up or some crap. Pretty good, eh? I stammered. A little too good, he chuckled nervously. I'm sorry. I just haven't performed anything since 1995. This is a bit overwhelming for me. I understand that feeling, he lied through his teeth. I wanted to call him a liar, but didn't wish to argue with the director. God knows how many actors have gotten into fights over mundane crap like that. So instead, I thanked him for being supportive. Jody's final scene from the original film was where his parents begin hearing Georgie in the closet. They go to check out the noise and he emerges from the shadows and slashes his parents' throats. Just like that. He didn't even know them. He reminded me so much of Richard Chase that it hurt. Both were vampires. That's right, Georgie was one of those extra devious serial killers. At least, he left Jody alive, I suppose. He leaves the house and pleads with his neighbors to call the police. They do just that and then, the police come at long last. But here's the part that makes no goddamn sense. You see, he was picked up by a police truck, but when truck arrives he is nowhere to be found. The remake changed The Vanishing entirely. Harvey Gilmore said it was to modernize the mythology, but the truth was simpler. He wanted something bigger. Flashier. Something that could get audiences theorizing on Reddit threads at 3 in the morning. The original disappearance, Jody stepping into a police truck and never stepping out, wasn't enough for him. Too understated, too subtle, too easy to miss. Harvey wanted spectacle. Harvey wanted answers. Or at least, the illusion of them. In the original, Georgie was just a man. A murderer with a taste for shadows, not some paranormal entity who could melt into mist. He wasn't a ghost, or a demon, or anything you could stamp with a genre label. He was human. Disturbingly human. And that made The Vanishing feel intentional, like the filmmakers wanted the audience to decide whether Jody escaped, or was taken, or simply broke under the trauma and fled before anyone could ask questions. But Harvey didn't trust audiences to think for themselves. So he rewrote the entire sequence. In the remake, Jody doesn't just vanish between the house and the station. No, Harvey made sure to stretch that moment into something operatic. Something with thunder and rain and an overdue sense of doom. He moves the scene out of the police truck entirely. No more quiet, no more ambiguity. Instead, the police take Jody to a temporary command post set up on the street, a flood of lights, uniforms, radios crackling with static. It's meant to feel safer, more grounded, more real. Because Harvey believed safety was the best setup for terror. You see, he explained during the first table read, modern audiences crave logic. They want breadcrumbs. They want a trail. He was shaking when he said it, whether from nerves or stimulants, I couldn't tell. So we're giving them a trail. And then, right at the moment they think they understand, we pull the rug out. I wanted to roll my eyes, but Gilbert shot me a warning look from across the room. In Harvey's version, Jody is wrapped in a thermal blanket, trembling under the harsh glare of floodlights. Officers swarm around him, asking him questions. What did you see? Did he speak? Did he hurt you? How did you get out? Jody doesn't answer. He just stares at the closet door of his childhood home, now blocked by yellow tape and bustling detectives. The camera stays tight on his face, catching every twitch, every darting movement in his eyes. Then the radios start hissing. It's faint at first, a soft distortion, like someone dragging their thumb along the speaker. Then a voice bleeds through the static. A man's voice. Breathing. Slow. Wet. Rhythmic. Harvey was very proud of that detail. It's not Georgie speaking, he said. It's the sound of him listening. The officers freeze, confused. The breathing on the radios grows heavier, more deliberate, until one of the radios cuts out entirely with an ugly pop. A few seconds later, another shuts off. Then another. Lights begin flickering. Cameras glitch. Harvey's script describes it as a controlled electrical collapse, though anyone with filmmaking experience would recognize it as the textbook setup for a horror reveal. This is where the remake truly diverges from the original. In the 1995 version, Georgie is never supernatural. He doesn't break the rules of physics. He doesn't appear and vanish with theatrical flair. He is a man in a closet with a knife. That's what made him terrifying. But Harvey wanted a mythos. A legacy serial killer, he called it. So in the remake, the breathing from the radios suddenly cuts off, and for a long, sickening moment, the set falls silent. Officers glance at one another. Detectives step closer to Jody. A paramedic kneels beside him. And then the floodlights explode. Not literally, Harvey didn't want actual pyrotechnics, but the effect is the same: blinding white, a violent pop, a wash of darkness. When the backup lights kick in, Jody is gone. Just gone. But unlike the original, the remake gives you something to latch onto. Every camera in the area glitches at the same frame, a shape standing behind Jody for exactly 1 second before the blackout. A tall figure. A man. Head tilted slightly, as if listening to something only he can hear. The audience isn't sure what they saw, but they know they saw something. Harvey called it a visual breadcrumb. To me, it felt like cheap insurance. After the blackout, officers swarm the scene. They scream Jody's name, search the perimeter, check every vehicle. Nothing. They pull security footage from nearby houses, but every file is corrupted between the moment Jody vanishes and the moment the lights return. In the 1995 version, the disappearance is a question mark. In Harvey's remake, it's an exclamation point. He even insisted on a final shot to close out the sequence, the camera panning back to the Keller house. Up the stairs. Down the hallway. Stopping at the open closet door, its darkness humming like a living thing. Then the door slams. Harvey thought it was brilliant. I thought it was bullshit. But I wasn't the writer. And I wasn't the director. I was the washed-up has-been playing Jody's father, trying to claw my way back into the industry that ruined me. So when Harvey asked me what I thought, I lied. It's intense, I said through clenched teeth. We're really elevating the material. Gilbert shot me a grateful look. Harvey beamed like he'd just reinvented cinema. But later that night, when I got back to my apartment and stared at my own closet in the dim light, I couldn't shake the feeling that the original got it right. Because reality doesn't need theatrics to be terrifying. People vanish every day without thunder or flickering floodlights. Sometimes trauma swallows them whole. Sometimes life chews them up. Sometimes they simply walk away because staying hurts too much. The original vanishing wasn't supernatural. It was sad. Human. Honest. And Harvey was stripping all of that away, replacing it with spectacle. But I didn't say any of that on set. I just showed up, hit my marks, delivered my lines, and prayed that this remake, this second chance, wouldn't evaporate the way Jody did. Because unlike him, I didn't have anywhere left to vanish to. Chapter 3, IHOP Blues. I drank the entire time Monsters in the Closet was being filmed. I'd wake up, take around 5 shots of whiskey, and go to whatever restaurant was nearby. I never expected for someone to recognize me, but somehow this woman did. Oh, my God. Cody Heller, she asked me as I ordered the plain buttermilk pancakes. Yes? That's me, I stammered profusely. I used to watch Monsters in the Closet every weekend when I was a child. That Georgie guy scared the hell out of me, she shuddered. Makes sense, I mumbled. Georgie had a face full of pock marks, something that ruined an otherwise attractive face. He was a master manipulator. That's how he got away with it for years and years. Think Ted Bundy, but far uglier. There was an unofficial book that created a story about him going to Andrew Carnegie High School. I read it. It was god-awful. I appreciated the effort, though. At the end of the day, that's all that matters. That's what they say, anyway. You mind if I sit by you? She said out of nowhere. Don't you have a job to do? I asked with a deep sigh. No one goes to this IHOP. It's in the middle of nowhere, she giggled, like she'd already developed a crush on me. That was enough to make me burst into laughter. Ah, I still don't have your name? I said, pointing to a scrap of paper for her to write it down. Marjorie, she said as she slid into the seat on my left. I liked her already. Something about her thawed my chest a little, just enough to feel the shift. Nice to meet you, Marjorie. I apologize for my wild look. I'm a bit hungover right now. Oh, that's okay. We have coffee specifically for hangovers. Just ask, she chirped, standing up to get a pot of coffee. She was being so kind to a piece of shit like me. It didn't make sense in any version of reality. People say I'm depressed, but the truth is simpler, I'm just tired. Tired of being controlled by the opposition. Mine happens to be Hollywood. Or should I call it Hollywoo? That's a BoJack Horseman reference, if you were wondering. Do you still have any films that you are making? She asked, returning with the coffee. Just the remake of Monsters in the Closet, I said sheepishly. How is that going? She asked gently. Our director wants to change the ending of the film. The new ending is bullshit. I snapped, slamming my fist on the table hard enough to make the silverware jump. A couple customers flinched. Oh? What is it? She asked, letting out a massive yawn. I didn't blame her. I was exhausted myself. I might have slept, but it wasn't good sleep, just unconsciousness passing for rest. He wants to make it paranormal. Can you believe that? I muttered, rubbing my temples. No. I can't. That sounds wacky as hell, she admitted, and then, unexpectedly, she grabbed my hand and hugged it tight. You okay? I asked, suddenly concerned. Yeah, just lonely as shit. This town is filled with horny dumbasses. All they want is sex. Sex is good and all, but it won't solve your problems. At least, not most of them. Her voice cracked, and then she broke down into tears right there in the booth. I froze, awkward as hell. Emotional expression wasn't something I handled gracefully. But I knew I should comfort her, so I did. I slid closer, wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and let her cry into my shirt. For once, the world stopped being about my own disaster long enough to see someone else hurting. Excuse me, I have been waiting on my order for 20 minutes, a customer barked, cutting straight through our tender moment like an axe. Marjorie jolted upright, wiping her eyes with the back of her wrist. I apologize. I'll get it right now, she said, standing so fast it gave me vertigo just watching her. You'd think that was the worst of it. Oh, no. It got way worse. Because the moment she stepped past him, he put his hand on her ass. Just full-on grabbed her like she was a prop. And something in me snapped. Not gently. Not metaphorically. Physically. I didn't feel like putting up with his crap for even half a second. So I grabbed his wrist. And broke that shit. Clean. Effortless. Years of repressed rage, substance abuse, and Hollywood trauma all funneled into one ugly, decisive motion. He wailed. Not like a man. Like a damn banshee. High-pitched, panicked, desperate, the kind of scream you hear in horror films right before the camera cuts. God damn. You broke my wrist, he yelled, clutching his arm like it was about to fall clean off. I'll break a hell of a lot more if you don't leave this place, I hissed, sharp and sudden, the way a viper snaps at a boot heel. Sicko, he spat under his breath. Yup, that's me, I said, entirely too proud. I hadn't planned on getting into it with anyone today. Violence just happened to me sometimes, like bad weather rolling in without warning. Marjorie stared at me, eyes wide. You didn't have to do that. You know you liked it, I said, grinning through the pounding hangover behind my eyes. You're right. I really did. Good. Now, if you'd be so kind as to give me his breakdown, I'd really appreciate it, I joked, except she didn't catch the joke. She took it literally and slid his plate across the counter to me. It looked like a unicorn had vomited on it. Garish sprinkles piled on top of some syrup-coated monstrosity. Just looking at it made my teeth ache. I took a bite anyway. A mistake. It wasn't sweet, it was weaponized sugar, the kind that could send a grown man into a coma. I pushed it toward her. Here. I can't finish this. And I hate wasting food. Oh, I couldn't possibly, she said, right before taking an absolutely feral bite out of it. She gagged immediately. Jesus. I can't eat this. A voice boomed from behind us. I'll eat it. We turned. The guy looked like he was 90% glucose. If someone poked him with a fork, syrup would have come out. Oh, please. Marjorie said, handing him the plate. He clamped onto it like a lobster snatching prey, dragging it toward his face with an alarming urgency. The sprinkles never stood a chance. We watched him tear into those pancakes with a kind of horror and fascination usually reserved for natural disasters. He devoured them like a man who hadn't seen food in days, though, knowing his type, it had probably been an hour since his last feeding frenzy. Then he waved down the waitress and ordered an entire jug of coffee. Not a cup. Not a pot. A jug. When it hit the table, he wrapped his hands around it like it was life support and chugged the whole thing in 30 seconds flat. I'm not joking. 30 seconds. The man was absolutely out of his mind. I mean it. You want to slow down, brother? My laugh came out thin, the kind that rides shotgun with panic. Not really, no, he said, eyes fixed ahead, knuckles white on the wheel. Okay then, I muttered. The word scraped my throat. I let my forehead sink to the sticky table, shoulders shaking as a quiet sob slipped out before I could catch it. You okay, Cody? She asked. Her voice was soft, but there was an edge there, like she already knew the answer. No, I didn't bother dressing it up. I can't seem to get a breakout role. 10 Acres was my best performing film, and that's not saying much. It had a budget of $100,000 and only made around 20. I know that film, she whispered, leaning close enough that her breath brushed my ear. You do? I lifted my head, staring at her like she'd just said my name in an empty room. Sure. That's the one about the depressed farmer, right? She asked, almost too gently. Yeah. I exhaled, a bitter laugh catching halfway. It won a Razzie for Worst Picture. Well, I loved it, she said, and when she smiled, it hit me with the force of something rehearsed and dangerous. You don't have to lie to me, I said, forcing myself upright. The room tilted a little. I'm not. Honest to God. She reached across the table and wrapped her fingers around mine. Her hands were warm, steady. It should have been comforting. Instead, my pulse ticked up. Nobody held on that tightly without wanting something. Say, how old are you anyway? I asked, searching her face for tells. 23, she said, no hesitation. Great, the word slipped out before I could stop it. What's wrong? Her eyes narrowed, tracking the shift in my tone. If we ever date, I'll be 10 years older than you, I said. It sounded pathetic out loud, but it was easier than admitting the real thing bothering me. I didn't know why she was still sitting here. So? I like older men, she giggled. The sound was light, but it didn't reach her eyes. Aha. Nice, I said, the chuckle catching in my chest like a cough. Something about this felt off-kilter, like a scene that had been blocked a dozen times but never quite played right. "So, what is your place like?" she asked, casually, like she was asking about the weather. It came too fast, too cleanly. "It's a dump," I said. "No point in lying. Half my lights don't work, and the television keeps flashing green." She smiled again. This time it lingered a second too long. "Why don't you come over to my place?" she asked, sudden, smooth, like she'd been waiting for the line, counting beats in her head. "I'd love that," I said with a grin. It was rare for me to smile. Most days, my face felt carved from stone, unmoved by anything except maybe a decent high. Pot loosened the hinges a bit. On weed, I'd crack up at the dumbest shit, at least, what I thought was dumb in the moment. Take the Big Gus Dickus scene from Monty Python. I'd be doubled over, wheezing like it was the first joke ever written. Honestly, that one holds up, so maybe that doesn't say much about me. But then there were the videos, those ridiculous clips where someone sneaks a cucumber behind a cat and the poor thing launches into orbit. I lived for that. The sudden panic, the dramatic leap, the way the cucumber became this existential threat. I'd laugh until my ribs hurt. Maybe that's why a smile felt so strange now, because it wasn't weed-induced, wasn't chemically tugged out of me. It just happened. Natural. Unforced. Weird feeling, but not a bad one. "So tell me about your parents," she asked me on the car ride to her place, her voice soft but steady, like she already knew the answer would carry weight. "Well, Pops is a lawyer and my mother is a nurse. Those are tough jobs," she said, unexpected, almost too perceptive. "Yeah, my mother always talks about the code grays she gets at the hospital," I replied, a shudder crawling up my spine as the memories surfaced. "What's code gray?" she asked, curiosity pricking through her calm tone. "A violent patient. There's a ton of druggies who commit them." I shook my head, feeling the hypocrisy of the statement burn somewhere behind my ribs. She was quiet for a moment, the hum of the engine filling the space between us. Then, "Have you ever tried heroin?" Too personal. Too fast. But I couldn't blame her, I'd opened the door with that code gray comment. "I'm a heroin addict," I admitted before I could stop myself. My voice felt like it belonged to someone else, thin, exposed. What the hell was I doing spilling my issues onto a stranger? "I smoke it," I added, as if the clarification made it any less ugly. "Oh, Cody. I'm so sorry to hear that." She reached across the console and placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, a small gesture that somehow hit harder than any accusation or pity ever had. "Cody?" she asked me out of nowhere, her voice soft but sharp enough to cut through the quiet hum of the road. I glanced over, one hand loosely on the wheel. "Yes? What is it?" I asked, genuinely curious about whatever had settled on her mind. She hesitated, just long enough for me to notice, then breathed out the words like she'd been holding them hostage. "I love you." The sentence hit me harder than any pothole on the highway, and my grip on the wheel tightened so abruptly I nearly totaled the car. My heart skidded faster than the tires ever could. "You shouldn't. I'm a piece of shit," I deeply sighed. "You broke that guy's wrist for touching my ass." "How are you a piece of shit?" she reminded me. "Even the worst of people can do good things," I countered. "What about Adolf Hitler?" she challenged, her tone sharp, like she thought she'd found the ultimate checkmate. Luckily, I had the perfect response already loaded. "He fixed Germany's economy. It was seriously screwed up before him because of the war and all that crap," I explained to Marjorie, keeping my voice steady as the streetlight streaked across the windshield. She blinked, taken off guard. "You're right." Then she went quiet, suddenly, completely, like the realization had pulled her into some deep place I couldn't quite reach. "We are here," she finally said, pointing toward her house as we rolled up the driveway. It was grass-green, tidy, and practically glowing under the midday light, definitely an upgrade from my shitty apartment. That was for sure. "Come, I'll show you my room," she said, a little too excitedly. She could have been a serial killer for all I knew. Still, I followed her inside, my eyes glancing around the kitchen. 6 cans of Campbell's chicken soup sat neatly on the counter. I was about to ask what that was about when she told me she was often sick. "You poor thing," I said, genuinely sympathetic. I knew what it was like to be sick, though mine had a different flavor, cotton fever. Something I'd only experienced once, because I couldn't stomach jabbing myself anymore. "Are you on heroin right now? Be honest," she demanded. "I wish," I grumbled. "You should quit before it kills you," she said, trying to help me. I didn't want to hear it, though. I let her know that. I didn't ask. "I won't quit. Stop trying to change me. God damn, everyone tries to make me sober. The doctors don't have a clue about what it's like to be an addict," I broke down sobbing. "I'm so sorry," she said, patting my back. "Don't be. It's not your fault," I comforted her. "I feel so worthless sometimes," she admitted. "That's the depression talking. Don't believe it. You are worth more than you realize." I brushed her bangs out of her hazel eyes. "Oh, and I love you too," I muttered, my face heating to a bright vermilion. "Do you actually mean that?" "I'm not having a one-night stand with you," she scoffed, folding her arms but watching me carefully, like she was terrified of the answer. "No, I want to be yours," I said. My hands were trembling like a salt shaker in an earthquake. "What the hell am I doing? I want to be yours too." She leaned in before I could second-guess myself. The moment her lips touched mine, everything inside me ignited. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a full-body detonation, heat and calm all at once. Trying to explain it felt pointless. Just imagine the greatest comfort you've ever known, poured into a single breath, a single touch, a single heartbeat. That was me in that moment. Then, she began to whisper into my ear, and my blood ran hot. "Show me real love, Daddy," she murmured. I didn't hesitate. The rest of the night became a blur of desire, closeness, and heat, like something out of an ancient, decadent painting brought to life. We shared a night of unspoken intensity and passion. That's all I'll say about that magical night. Chapter 4, Ice Cream Man. Marjorie and I became a couple, not just any couple, but the kind that held each other upright when the world tried to knock us down. We learned to navigate each other's storms, and in those early months, it felt like we were becoming something solid, something real. She'd finally been promoted to manager at IHOP, a milestone she celebrated with that contagious laugh of hers and a hug so tight it felt like she could squeeze the darkness right out of me. Everything seemed to be lining up, piece by fragile piece, as if life had decided to give us a breather for once. Then the phone call came. Her father, a heart attack, sudden, brutal, final. It was as if someone flipped a switch inside her. Gone were her cheery mood and soft giggles, the ones that used to dance through our small, now fixed apartment like sunlight. In their place came long, trembling sighs and tears that soaked into my shirt night after night. She tried to hide them at first, embarrassed by her grief, but it broke through anyway, raw and unfiltered. I held her as best I could. But some wounds don't close quickly. Some don't close at all. "Let's get some ice cream," I suggested one afternoon, trying to offer her even the smallest escape. "I'm not hungry," she muttered, the words tight and brittle, like she was holding herself together by sheer force. "You need to eat. You can't just down Campbell's chicken soup every day." "Actually, I can," she snapped back, arms folding defensively across her chest. "Come on," I said softly, reaching for her hand. "You'll feel better soon. I miss him so much." "I shouldn't, though." Her voice cracked, and then the tears came, silent at first, then shaking her whole body. Watching her crumble like that made something in my chest twist painfully, as if her grief had a way of reaching inside me and pulling until I was seconds from breaking down with her. So I just held her again. Tighter this time. Sometimes that was all either of us could do. I wish I had known him, I found myself saying unexpectedly, the words slipping out before I could second-guess them. He was a selfish prick, she replied without hesitation. Never paid child support, never took us anywhere fun. Our idea of a big night out was Monopoly and Uno on the living room floor. And the only time we were allowed to watch TV was during football. She let out a sharp, unexpected laugh. Still wish you met him? No, not really. But, was he at least nice? I asked, even though the answer hung in the air long before she said it. Fuck no. If you had money, he'd be nice to you. If you didn't, he'd scream and shout like it was his full-time job. She shook her head, bitterness and sadness twisting together in her voice. What a fucking family picture, huh? When is the funeral? I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral even though, deep down, a darker impulse stirred. Part of me wanted to go just to spit on his grave. That was what he deserved. Everyone knew it. June 2nd. Don't tell me you're coming too, she said, eyes widening with disbelief. Oh, I sure am. I replied, a little too quickly, a little too eagerly. Just don't do anything stupid at the funeral, she warned, pointing a trembling finger at me like she already sensed the storm brewing inside. Oh, I won't, I said with a sly smile I couldn't quite suppress. Good. Now let's get some ice cream, she suddenly cheered, her mood lifting just enough to catch a glimmer of the girl she used to be. The prospect of getting it genuinely excited her, and, if I was honest, it excited me too. For a moment, the world felt lighter again. The world outside was foggy, San Francisco fog times 10. It was the kind of weather that swallowed everything whole, leaving only silhouettes and the faint glow of street lamps. Terrible weather for going to the park, honestly. But that's exactly where we went, because all the actual ice cream shops were closed on Saturdays. Go figure. So we wandered over to the lone ice cream vendor standing bravely in the haze and made our choices. I ordered crème brûlée. She ordered coconut. I couldn't hold it in. Coconut? Really? I burst out laughing. Hey, don't judge, she pouted, her lower lip jutting out just enough to be adorable. Sorry. Do you feel better now? I asked, noticing she hadn't even tasted it yet. She finally bit into it, and her whole face shifted, softened, brightened, warmed. Pure ecstasy. I could tell I'd managed to cheer her up, even if just a little. Yes, much better, she said with a satisfied little hum. Everyone loves ice cream, Marge, I chuckled. My grandpa liked the boring kind, she muttered, wrinkling her nose. Butter pecan? I guessed. Bingo, she giggled. Boo! I shouted. Indeed, she returned, wearing that signature chuckle of hers, the one I'd missed. Her old self flickered back to life, and I was all for it. I like seeing you like this, I told her quietly. It's hard to feel anything right now. It's like there's a void that nothing can fill, she said, her voice softening into something fragile. I want to fill your void, if you'll let me, I murmured, pulling her closer and brushing my mouth against hers. Get a room, someone from the vendor's stand shouted. Better not yell, I shot back. You could lose your voice that way. He responded by pulling out a pair of brass knuckles, flashing them like a threat he was more than willing to act on. I wasn't in the mood for another fight, not today, so we exchanged a glance, and without a word, we both walked away into the fog. Man, that was close, she laughed, the sound thin and shaky, nervousness wearing a cheap mask of humor. Tell me about it. I was half worried he'd beat the crap out of both of us, I said, glancing over my shoulder with a paranoid twist in my gut, half expecting the guy to come limping back for revenge. It wasn't even an insult. Just an observation. But apparently he had paper-thin skin, fragile ego, fragile wrist, the whole package. We decided to watch the original Naked Gun film together that night. Neither of us said it outright, but we both knew why. We needed something, anything, to lessen the everyday agony of life. The heaviness that clung to us like a second skin. So we chose something hilarious to replace that feeling. Something absurd, stupid, comforting in the way only truly ridiculous comedy can be. For a few hours, we wanted to laugh instead of drown. Chapter 5, Spending Time with Gilbert. Gilbert called me one fateful day, and he wasn't pleased. "You haven't contacted me in 2 months? What's that all about?" he practically hissed, like some pissed-off alley cat ready to pounce. "Sorry, I've just been really busy," I told him truthfully. "Doing what?" "Smoking more junk," he pressed, claws out. "For your information, I got a girlfriend. She loves me more than you can imagine." "What would you know about love, Gilbert Redder?" I used his full name just to jab him where it hurt. He scoffed, the sound sharp enough to cut. "I have a wife and a smart son who never touched drugs. He actually wants to live a full life. Unlike you." His voice rose with the ferocity of a lion defending its pride. For a split second, I considered punching him in the face. But I also didn't feel like getting ass-raped in prison, so I did the sensible thing, I apologized. And for once, it wasn't some half-assed sorry. It was real. He exhaled, the fire in his chest dying down. "I forgive you. Just don't leave me hanging like that again," he muttered at last. "What do you say we grab a beer and forget this ever happened?" I offered him. He gave a small, tired smile. "I'd like that." "Good, let's hit Brewers," I said, a little too enthusiastically. That place had practically funded my bloodstream for years. He followed me out, and we both climbed into his car, a turquoise Porsche Camaro. I didn't even know they made them in that kind of garish, radioactive blue. Still, I kept my mouth shut. This wasn't the moment to mock his taste in cars. This was my one shot at reconnecting with Gilbert, and I'd shoved him onto the back burner for far too long. Sitting there in the passenger seat, I felt the weight of it. The pattern. The way I'd let people drift until they disappeared completely. Most of my high school friends had slipped through the cracks the same way, quiet departures I was too numb or selfish to notice until they were already gone. We finally got to the pub, and the warmth inside felt like stepping out of a storm. We headed straight for the counter and didn't even hesitate. 2 Coors, we said in unison, our favorite beer, the one thing we could always agree on. The bartender popped the caps off with a metallic snap and slid the bottles toward us. We clinked them together, a quiet little toast to forgetting the chaos that dragged us here in the first place. For a moment, it actually felt possible. "How's life, Cody?" he mumbled, his cheek mashed against the table like it was the only thing keeping him upright. I couldn't help it, I let out a small laugh. Something about the way he sprawled there, face first and defeated, was weirdly amusing. I took a slow sip of my beer before answering, letting the fizz settle on my tongue. "Same circus, different clowns," I said. He snorted into the wood grain, not bothering to lift his head. "Ain't that a bitch?" he mumbled into the wood, voice muffled and oddly pitiful. "I guess, yeah. Do you ever get tired of your job as an agent?" I asked, leaning back, curious despite myself. He lifted his head just enough to look at me, eyes half open. "It's not that I get tired so much as I get some crazy people I'm supposed to audition," he said with a shudder. "How bad is it?" I pressed. "Big mistake." He exhaled slowly, then scratched the back of his neck. "Well, this one guy wanted to be filmed inside the Arkansas asylum. Wanted to be given crazy pills, treated like shit, and prescribed actual meds for his bipolar I disorder. I don't even know if he ever recovered after that circus." He chuckled, but it was dry as sandpaper. I stared into my beer, watching the bubbles rise and pop. My grandmother went to that asylum, I muttered. The weight of it settled on my chest. She got lobotomized. Came out a completely different person. Cruel. Empty. The doctors said they cut her amygdala or some bullshit. I rubbed my forehead, feeling the old bitterness flare. Rosemary Kennedy had the same thing done. Except she spent the rest of her life stuck in a nursing home, couldn't speak, couldn't even hold food right. I took another sip of beer, slow, deliberate. Shit's depressing, man. I let out a heavy, soul-soaked sigh and dragged myself over to the counter. The bar lights felt too bright, the floor too sticky, the world too loud. I ordered 2 scotches on the rocks, because beer suddenly wasn't cutting it, not after that conversation. The bartender didn't even blink. Just poured. Guess I wasn't the first person tonight trying to drown something ugly. I carried the glasses back to the table, that familiar ache curling in my gut. Depressed as hell for no reason other than the ghosts we'd stirred up between us. I sat down, slid his drink over, and stared into mine like it might explain everything. Yeah. This was my routine. Feel miserable, drink until I don't, wake up feeling worse, rinse, repeat. I swirled the ice, heard it clink like a warning bell. Think I should quit? I muttered to no one in particular. Then I snorted softly. Right. If I suddenly stopped, I'd probably get delirium tremens, the real deal, the kind of hallucinations you don't come back from. Not the colorful, dancing galaxy kind. Not the trippy, neon spirit quest kind. No. These ones latch onto your eyes and tear reality apart. I took a long drink, feeling it burn all the way down. Still think I should quit? Yeah. Thought so. I'm too drunk to drive, Gilbert groaned as he lurched to his feet. He swayed like a tree in a hurricane, blinked twice, and nearly toppled over. Can we get a cab? I asked, even though we both knew it wasn't a suggestion, it was salvation. Sure, lemme, call, a taxi, he muttered. Then came the spectacle, him patting every pocket like he'd forgotten which dimension his phone was in, pulling it out, dropping it, picking it up, squinting, and somehow, miraculously, dialing. When the driver answered, the guy's voice floated through the receiver like thick smoke. He sounded absolutely blasted, slurring his way through the conversation like he was lying on a cloud somewhere far away. Perfect. Just perfect. 2 drunk idiots waiting on a driver who's high as the moon. What a world. When he did finally arrive, I noticed that he was Italian. How do I know this? He had a tattoo of the Italian flag on his bicep and kept saying, "Go straight." Vero? We just nodded as he drove us both to our apartments. Marjorie was at the stove when we stumbled in, the sharp scent of garlic and onions filling the whole apartment. She turned just enough to see me, and the look on her face was enough to sober a corpse. She slammed the pan down. Are you fucking drunk? Unbelievable. Her voice hit me like a shove. Yes, Marge, I slurred, instantly regretting the way the words slid out of my mouth. She crossed her arms, eyes blazing. Can you even tell what time it is? I glanced at the clock on the wall, my vision swimming. 4:27 p.m. The room went dead silent for half a second. Then. It's 11, you dumbass, she snapped, shoving me toward the couch with a surprising amount of force for someone half my size. I collapsed into the cushions like a ragdoll. She pointed at me with all the fury of a judge delivering a sentence. Tonight, you're sleeping here. I didn't argue. I didn't even think about arguing. God knew what storm I'd set off if I tried. Better to sink into the couch, close my eyes, and let the room spin on without me. And so, I went to sleep that night drunk out of my mind praying that tomorrow would be better. But Hollywood never cares. It never did. Chapter 6, Sour Patch Kids. Saturday felt hollow, the kind of day where the walls close in if you sit still too long. So Marjorie and I made a pact, roller coaster or bust. Anything to jolt me out of the fog I'd been dragging around since that night. We stood in line, the metal rails cold under our fingers, the air thick with the smell of fried dough and sunburnt tourists. My head still throbbed, but at least the world felt alive again. I reached into my American Spirit pack, pulled out a cigarette, and held it out to her without much thought. A peace offering. A distraction. Something to do with my hands while the guilt still simmered. To my surprise, she took it without hesitation. Lit it expertly. Inhaled like it was second nature. She blew out a slow stream of smoke and shot me a sideways smirk. Turns out we had two things in common now, alcohol-fueled chaos, and nicotine. It wasn't much, but in that moment, it felt like enough. Hey! No smoking near the roller coaster, the carny barked, voice thin and whiny. I turned to see this kid, couldn't have been older than 14, pointing at me like he owned the place. I felt my temper flare, heat prickling at my neck. But I wasn't about to start a fight over a cigarette. Not today. I stomped it out on the concrete, letting the ashes scatter. God, I hate kids. Always demanding shit and never giving anything back. And then puberty hits and all hell breaks loose, suddenly they're hormonal dictators in tiny bodies, and the world just keeps letting them run around like it's normal. I shook my head, muttering under my breath, and turned back to Marjorie. We still had a roller coaster to ride. You first, I said, giving her a gentle nudge toward the boarding platform. She shot me a grateful smile and stepped forward, excitement flickering in her eyes. I went next, sliding into the seat with a mix of anticipation and dread. The roller coaster was one of those old wooden beasts, creaking with every bolt and plank. The kind of ride that looked like it could ignite into flames if someone were careless enough to light a match nearby. Now I understood why that kid had been on our asses about the cigarette. Not that it made me like him any more. But at least there was some faint logic behind his whining. I gripped the safety bar and waited, the wood groaning under the weight of the approaching adrenaline. Oh, crap, some kid screamed behind us just as the coaster lurched forward. Oh, crap was right, because the damn thing didn't just start moving. It launched. We hit what had to be 90 miles an hour in seconds. 90. I don't even reach that when I'm speeding, and my personal record is 85. 85 feels fast. 90 felt like the universe was trying to rip my face off. The wind blasted against us in a wall of noise and pure force. My stomach shot up into my throat, and the Sour Patch Kids I'd eaten earlier staged a violent uprising. I think I'm gonna hurl, I gagged, gripping the restraint like it could save my soul. Through the roar of the air, Marjorie's voice sliced through like a whip. Don't you even dare. I clenched my jaw, swallowed hard, and somehow, miraculously, kept everything down. Barely. As in, micrometers away from disaster. When the coaster finally slowed, I felt like a ghost who'd barely avoided becoming ectoplasm on the tracks. That was insane, I gasped, trying to catch what little breath I had left. It wasn't every day I went to a fair and nearly lost consciousness over a handful of Sour Patch Kids. But right then, they sat in my stomach like molten regret. I closed my eyes for a moment and imagined they were heroin instead, something that would knock out the noise, the fear, the spinning world. Anything to help me blank out. But I'd left my pipe back at the apartment. Forgot it in my rush to get out of the house, and now the thought of telling Marge I needed to go back sent a bolt of terror through me. So I kept my mouth shut. And suffered. The withdrawals hit fast, sweaty palms, trembling fingers, a deep shiver that crawled up my spine and refused to leave. My skin went cold and pale, and even the damn carny noticed. Hey, dude, you okay? You look kinda sick, he said, frowning like he actually cared. Goddamn kid. What the hell did he know about addiction? He probably smoked reefer once behind a school cafeteria and thought he was edgy. Me? I'd been smoking heroin since I was 16. Over 2 decades of chasing the same numbness, the same quiet. For a moment, I suddenly understood Lane Staley, the loneliness, the rot, the feeling of crumbling from the inside out. Except his hell played out in Seattle. Mine was here, in this gaudy, sun-soaked pit of vanity. Materialistic hell. Also known as Hollywood. Sorry, Hollywood. I don't feel so well, I admitted. I can tell, she muttered. Must be those Sour Patch Kids, I lied. Or maybe all the heroin you're withdrawing from, she reminded me. Probably the true reason, I admitted. Have you ever shared it with someone? She asked, curious. Once, yeah. But we broke up, I said with a massive frown. I'm sorry for bringing her up, she winced. No worries, I murmured, taking her hands and kissing them gently, trying to steady both of us. I didn't even know what I was doing, whether it was instinct, desperation, or just withdrawal-fueled confusion. And then everything blurred. One moment we were standing there under the rattling shadow of the roller coaster. The next, we were in bed, tangled up in each other, heat and motion replacing panic and cold sweat. Then, black. I must have passed out at some point, because the next clear memory I had was waking up with my heart pounding and the room spinning, no idea how one moment had led to the next. The gaps in the night scared me more than anything else. Not the coaster, not the kid, not even the withdrawals. But the empty space where my memories should have been. I guess that's part of the symptoms too. Losing pieces of yourself without realizing they've slipped away. I crawled under the covers that night with a pit in my stomach, whispering a quiet prayer into the dark. That whatever was happening to my mind would stop. That the holes would stop widening. That tomorrow I'd still recognize myself. Because I knew what it looked like when memories vanished for good. I'd already lost an entire year once, my 17th year, swallowed whole by Salvia divinorum. Most people think it's some harmless, trippy leaf you smoke once in a blue moon. They have no idea how it grabs hold of you, how it digs in, how it steals time like it has the right. It's a terrible drug, bitter, disorienting, ugly, but somehow it hooks you anyway, pulling you back in even when you swear you're done. And that lost year still haunts me. A blank stretch of life I can't recall no matter how hard I try. A year people insist I lived, even though it feels like someone else wore my skin during it. So as I drifted toward sleep, trembling and exhausted, all I could hope was that the past wouldn't repeat itself. That I wouldn't wake up tomorrow missing another piece of who I used to be. Chapter 7, Codependency. I got Marjorie hooked on heroin. I know I'm a piece of shit. I have no real excuse. Here's how it happened. Hey, would you be open to trying H with me? I asked her during dinner one fateful night. She'd just set down a bowl of mashed potatoes, impeccable, buttery, perfectly whipped. The kind of comfort food someone makes with real care, not the kind that should be paired with a question like that. She blinked at me, fork pausing halfway to her lips. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the soft hum of her refrigerator, that small domestic buzz that made everything feel stable, almost gentle. Safe. And then I ruined it. Heroin, she finally echoed, the word awkward, like her mouth didn't know how to shape it. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. Trying to act like this wasn't a catastrophic suggestion. Like it was no more dangerous than offering her a new drink or asking if she wanted to watch a movie. Anything but what it truly was, an invitation into the same darkness that had been feeding on me for years. It's good, I lied. It'll help you relax. She stared at me long enough for guilt to crawl up my throat, long enough for me to nearly retract the words, nearly undo the damage. But then she said, quietly. Okay. If it's with you. And that was it. The line crossed. The moment I became the villain in a story that didn't need one. I wish I could claim ignorance, or desperation, or that I didn't understand the weight of what I was asking. But I did. Every damn bit of it. And she trusted me anyway. I drove to my less shitty apartment and took out my smoking pipe. The best part is smack doesn't have a smell. So you can get away with acting sober. Unless you outdo yourself and go Janis Joplin crazy. But I know you won't do that, I told her, my voice trembling, my hands shaking so badly I had to clench them beneath the table. What the hell was wrong with me? There I was, trying to sound reassuring, trying to act like this was normal, like this was something a boyfriend should be saying to the woman who trusted him most. But all I could hear was the panic beneath my own words, the desperation twisting my voice tight. I was about to ruin my girlfriend's life for good. Not by accident. Not by ignorance. But because I lied. Lied that heroin was safe. Lied that she'd be fine. Lied that it was something we could just try, like a new dessert or a different brand of cigarette. Yeah, safe my ass. The only truth in anything I'd said was that it helped me relax. Everything else, the ease, the control, the illusion of handling it, was pure bullshit. And she didn't know any of that yet. She only knew what I told her. And that made the guilt taste like metal on my tongue. Will I be able to quit if I get addicted to it? She asked, her voice trembling, her fingers twisting the hem of her sleeve like she was trying to wring the fear out of it. That was my moment. My last clean chance to tell her the truth. That quitting wasn't simple. That addiction digs in like barbed wire. That once you start, the drug doesn't just enter your body. It moves into your life. But instead of honesty, I reached for the lie. Yes, you can, I told her, the words cracking like thin ice under my tongue. I handed her the pipe. Watched her lift it with shaking hands. Saw the dirt-brown heroin curl into smoke, then into her lungs, then into her bloodstream. And then she collapsed onto my old Lazaboy. The chair I wouldn't let anyone touch. The one thing in my apartment I actually cared about keeping clean. But in that moment, I couldn't care less about the chair. Couldn't care about the dent she made in the cushion or the way her hair fell across the armrest. All I could feel was the heat of my own self-loathing rising in my chest. I had let this happen. I had put that pipe in her hand. I had destroyed a lover's chance at happiness in a single breath of smoke. For that, there was no apology big enough. No forgiveness waiting on the other side. Not from her. Not from me. I love you, Cody, she mumbled into the air, her voice soft and blurred at the edges, like she wasn't fully inside her own body anymore. The words hit me like a brick to the chest. Not because I didn't feel something for her. But because hearing it right then, in that moment, with the smoke still drifting in the room. It felt wrong. Heavy. Crushing. I should have stayed quiet. Should have told her she didn't know what she was feeling, not like this. But instead, I leaned into the lie. Or maybe into the truth I didn't deserve to say. I love you too, Marjorie, I murmured, every syllable burning in my throat. And the fury that followed wasn't aimed at her. It was aimed squarely at myself. At the hands that passed her the pipe. At the voice that told her she could quit anytime. At the weakness that let this happen. I told her I loved her while knowing I'd just handed her a future she didn't deserve. A future I'd helped poison. And that was the part one could never forgive myself for. I can't wait to go to work on Monday, she mumbled, her voice drifting somewhere between dreamy and disconnected. The words made my stomach twist. Work. Monday. Routine. She was talking like nothing had changed. Like she hadn't just crossed a line she couldn't uncross. Can't you just say that you're sick? I asked, too quickly, too desperately. She blinked slowly, then shook her head. I could, but that only works for a bit. I can't let these people down. They're my life. I love them all. Her words came out warm, syrupy, overflowing with affection. The heroin was doing that thing it sometimes does. Making everything feel soft and profound. Turning anyone in sight into something precious. I couldn't tell yet whether that sudden empathy was beautiful. Or horrifying. You know what the best part is? I mumbled, my voice low, ashamed of how easily the lie formed behind my teeth. What? She giggled, eyes half-lidded, head rolling against the chair. No one will see any needle marks on you, I said quietly. Finally, painfully, telling the truth. Even the worst people spit out honesty sometimes. But that didn't make it any less damning. I just want to watch TV. Can we? She asked, already sinking into my velvet couch like she was made of liquid. Yeah, sure, I said, even though my brain was too scrambled to pick a single thing. Decision-making isn't exactly a strong suit when you're balancing guilt, panic, and the lingering haze of someone else's high. Any suggestions? I finally asked, hoping she'd steer us somewhere safe. Something brainless, something bright, something not a mirror. She tilted her head, squinting like she had to fish the idea out of deep water. Have you ever seen Trainspotting? My blood turned to ice. Of all the movies in the universe, she had to pick the one about heroin addicts spiraling into oblivion. Relevant? Sure. Appropriate for someone currently on heroin for the first time? Not even close. Sure, why not, I heard myself say, even though every instinct screamed no. I dug through my DVDs with frantic hands until I finally found it wedged between two dumb comedies I never watched. Then I walked back to her and dropped onto the couch beside her, the velvet cool against my skin. And suddenly, I wanted to hold her. No logic behind it. No reason tied to guilt or fear. Just a pull. A need. So I slid closer, and she leaned into me like it was the most natural thing in the world. Her warmth sank into me, soft and easy, like cuddling a stuffed animal you didn't realize you missed until it was suddenly there again. It felt good. A little too good. The kind of good that makes you wonder what part of you it's feeding. Comfort, need, or the hollow space you're trying so hard to fill. The film started, the opening credits rolling across the screen, but within 10 minutes she was fast asleep on my lap. It hadn't taken much at all, just about 20 milligrams. To her, that was enough. To me, it was a baby dose. I regularly smoked 50 milligrams at a time. For context, that's a heavy dose. Dangerous for most people. Life-altering. I wouldn't recommend anyone go that far on their first try. Heroin isn't a casual experiment, it's a calculated risk, one that can spiral out of control before you even realize it. If anyone reading this is curious, please take all risk reduction measures possible. Know your limits. Measure doses carefully. Never assume you can handle more than your body and mind can sustain. Because there's no easy undo button with this drug. I tucked her into bed, pulling the covers up around her like a shield against the world, and soon we both drifted off on that Saturday night. Tomorrow was Sunday, but we didn't go to church anyway. No rituals. No obligations. Just the quiet permission to snooze our lives away for a little while longer. I did not have any dreams that night. Nothing stirred in the dark corners of my mind. Just the blank, empty stillness that felt both merciful and terrifying. Chapter 8, Marge the Manager. I decided to visit her workplace on a regular Wednesday, expecting, well, I wasn't sure what I was expecting. But when I saw her, smiling and grinning like a champion, a rush of relief washed over me. She hadn't become addicted to heroin. You could tell, not by anything she said, but by the way her eyes glowed, the way her smile spread effortlessly across her face. It was infectious, impossible not to feel a little lighter just standing near her. Great to see you up and running. I exclaimed, a surge of relief spilling through me. I couldn't even put into words how happy I was that she hadn't gotten hooked, that she was still herself, intact and alive in the way that mattered most. I had a bit of coffee, what can I say? She giggled, a wild, manic little laugh that made the moment feel alive, chaotic, and real all at once. Somehow, I knew she'd had more than just a cup of coffee. Her hands were jittering the same way Harvey's used to, those sharp, nervous tremors that never quite settled. She'd met him once and wasted no time calling him a creep. He tried to go on a date with me, she'd told me, disgust twisting her face. I would have knocked Gilmore out cold for even trying, but the bastard always had 6 bodyguards orbiting him like he was royalty. Because, of course, the coward did. I pretended to be a customer, sliding into a booth and flipping open the menu like I belonged. After a moment, I picked out the coffee stack pancakes and let my head rest against the table. The heroin from the night before still clung to me, a warm, hazy fog that made the world wobble just slightly. I felt loopy, unsteady, caught somewhere between euphoria and the creeping guilt of what I'd done. My God, I'm evil, I muttered under my breath, the words slipping out before I could catch them. What was that? A waitress asked, her voice tight with worry as she took a cautious step toward my booth. I snapped back into character instantly. It's a song by Metallica. Am I evil? I lied without missing a beat. Improvisation had always been my strongest survival skill. She let out a nervous little laugh, visibly unclenching. Oh. Right. Thought you were saying something else. Nah, I said with a half-smile, waving it off. She walked away, and I sank a little deeper into my seat, grateful the moment had passed. Inside, though, the guilt still gnawed at me, slow, relentless, and far too honest. I waved her over, bracing myself, and, to my shock, she actually came. Marjorie slid into the booth across from me, her smile bright but her pupils blown wide, hands trembling like she'd been plugged into an outlet. The sight sent a cold spike straight down my spine. I cleared my throat, steadying my voice as best I could. I needed to ask, even if I already dreaded the answer. Marge, where'd you get the pills? She tried to laugh it off, but the shake in her shoulders made it look more like a glitch in reality than a giggle. Something was very, very wrong. From Joseph, she whispered into my ear, her voice barely audible over the hum of the restaurant. I froze, my brain struggling to process it. From opioids to stimulants, just like that, without hesitation, without pause, without fear. It was beyond comprehension. The speed at which she dove into danger made my stomach twist, equal parts awe and terror. Who the fuck is Joseph? I mumbled, the words slipping out before I could soften them. She tried to soothe me with that gentle, airy tone. He's a very nice guy. You'd like him. Nice guy. Right. All I could picture was some scrawny, wide-eyed dealer with a twitch in his jaw and a smile too big for his face, someone who handed out random pills like party favors, someone who didn't give a damn about consequences. The anger in me simmered hot. I didn't want to like him. I wanted to drag him outside and make sure he never offered her a single milligram of anything ever again. I knew it was hypocritical. That was the twisted punchline of the whole situation. I could sit there, full of rage at some random guy named Joseph for handing her pills, while conveniently ignoring the fact that I was the one who put a pipe in her hand in the first place. But I never pretended to be a saint. Hell, I barely scraped by as a functioning human being. So if anyone expected moral consistency from me, they were in for a brutal disappointment. Let's start with the obvious, I muttered internally, almost like confessing to myself. I'm not a good person. Never claimed to be. Never even tried. Still, that didn't stop that cold sting of jealousy, or fear, or whatever the hell it was, from crawling up my spine. Because even though I was a hypocrite, the thought of someone else dragging her deeper into the abyss, an abyss I'd already opened beneath her feet, made my blood run hot. You said he's nice, I repeated, quieter this time. But nice people don't hand out mystery pills. But all I managed to say was a low, strained. "What exactly did he give you?" "Adderall," she said, almost too casually, like she was naming a toothpaste brand. Before I could process it, she was already sliding a pill into my palm along with a cup of water. Her hands were shaking, eyes wide, pupils blown like she was staring straight into an eclipse. I should have hesitated. I should have asked questions. I should have done anything except what I actually did. I tossed it back and swallowed. At first, nothing. Not even a whisper of a buzz. It was almost disappointing, like the promise of a fireworks show that never started. And then it slammed into me. Hard. It was like someone flipped a switch in my skull. Every light turned on at once. My heartbeat thumped like a snare drum, my thoughts sharpened into razor blades, and suddenly I could hear every conversation in the diner. I felt smarter, stronger, invincible, like a god with a to-do list. "Holy hell," I whispered, gripping the table as the rush surged through me. "That's something." "Indeed. Still want to meet him?" I asked, my voice tight with a mixture of curiosity and unease. She tilted her head, pressing softly into my arm, her warmth grounding me in a way that made my nerves settle just enough. "Yes, of course," she murmured, her tone light and eager, almost careless, like the world outside our little bubble didn't exist. And just like that, my anxiety spiked again. Meeting Joseph meant stepping into unknown territory, and I wasn't sure if I was bracing to protect her, or to punish myself. We had to wait until her shift ended at 4 before we could finally meet this mysterious Joseph. The hours crawled by, each minute thick with anticipation and unease. The name Joseph immediately set off alarms in my head. There's a Joseph in BoJack Horseman, and he's a complete piece of shit, utterly irredeemable, a manipulator through and through. Nothing about him suggests safety, morality, or even basic decency. I tried to shake it off, remind myself this was a different person, but the thought lingered, sour and insistent, like a warning I couldn't ignore. "Let me call him," she said, settling onto a blue container outside the restaurant, her phone already in hand. "I don't like this," I admitted, voice low and tight. Unease coiled around my chest like a live wire. "What do you like?" she asked, tilting her head, eyes sharp. She wasn't mocking, just stating the truth I'd been trying to ignore. It was a fact I couldn't argue with. I didn't get attached easily. People, things, even fleeting moments, they rarely held me for long. Her question lingered, heavy and deliberate, making me wonder if I ever really had the right to protect anyone when I could barely protect myself. "Well, I like you," I managed, feeling the heat rush straight into my face. I must have looked bubblegum pink, like some embarrassed teenager instead of a man with 2 decades of bad habits behind him. "Like or love?" "There's a huge difference," she said, calm but firm, calling out the distinction I'd been dodging for weeks. I swallowed hard. "Love. I love you, Marjorie." I leaned in for a kiss, slow, sincere, the kind that felt like the start of something instead of the end. But before our lips touched, a figure slid out from the shadows. Joseph. He appeared without a sound, thin and pale, like a specter stepping through a crack in reality. His eyes had that wired shimmer I recognized instantly, and his smile was too calm for someone who'd been lurking in an alley. "Hope I'm not interrupting," he said, though the smirk on his face made it clear he absolutely meant to. "Nah, you're fine," I said, even though every cell in my body screamed the opposite. My jaw clenched so hard it ached. Yeah, the anger issues were crawling right up my spine again, no surprise there. Joseph grinned like he'd just been given permission to ruin the evening. "Great, because I've got something special for the both of you." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small plastic bag. "White powder. Coke." My eyes widened despite myself. Dealers were supposed to be gone, locked up, dead, vanished, whatever. But here he was, standing in the open with a bag of blow like it was nothing more than a packet of sugar. "You gotta be kidding me," I muttered under my breath. But I still asked the question. "You got a razor blade?" It wasn't curiosity. It was muscle memory. Old habits humming awake. And yeah, I knew exactly how stupid it was. Cocaine always made my nose bleed like a stuck pig, and that's why I'd sworn it off ages ago. But here I was again, staring at the bag, staring at Joseph, feeling that familiar pull like gravity had hands. "How many drugs have you sold?" I asked, already lining the coke out on the grimy tabletop. Joseph's $5 bill was practically begging to be rolled, so I grabbed it and didn't hesitate. One sharp inhale, then the familiar burn shot straight up my sinuses. Joseph laughed, this jittery, nasal snicker that told me he'd been riding the wave long before he met up with us. "More than I can count," he bragged, sniffing like a man whose nose had forgotten how to function sober. "I bet," I muttered, rubbing under my nostril where the sting settled in. I wasn't sure if I respected him, despised him, or wanted to knock out a tooth just to make myself feel better. Probably all three. Truth was, I'd tried dealing before. Thought I could make rent pushing what I smoked anyway. But the cops had nailed me faster than I could fold a baggie. Gave me a citation and a sermon, then warned me that if I so much as thought about selling heroin again, they'd throw 15 years at me. Land of the brave? More like land of the imprisoned, where dreams go to die behind concrete walls and barbed wire. And here Joseph was, selling blow like it was lemonade on a summer sidewalk. "Snort more." "I don't want to get caught," Joseph hissed, flicking paranoid glances over his shoulder like the shadows themselves were wearing badges. His urgency didn't surprise me, dealers like him never relaxed, but it sure as hell didn't make things any better. Marjorie stiffened beside me, her breath shallow, her pupils wide and glassy. I could tell she was already in over her head, and Joseph pushing us only tightened the noose. "Relax," I muttered, though the coke was starting to hum under my skin like a live wire. "You're acting like the DEA's about to rappel down the walls." He didn't laugh. His jaw clenched, grinding like he was trying to turn his teeth into powder. The truth? I understood why he wanted us to finish it. If we got stopped, possession looked a hell of a lot better than dealing. But understanding didn't make any of this less dangerous. Or less stupid. Or less likely to end with one of us face down in a holding cell. Still, with Joseph glaring and Marge already spiraling, I leaned back over the line. Because in moments like this, logic didn't stand a chance against fear, pressure, and the promise of one more fleeting rush. I shot up to my feet so fast the world blurred for a second, that familiar cocaine buzz tightening every nerve like a violin string pulled way too far. "We're done here," I snapped at Joseph. Even my voice sounded jittery, sharp, electric, ready to combust. He cocked his head, confused and irritated at the same time. "What do you mean done? You barely." "I can't sit still," I cut him off. My leg was bouncing on its own. My jaw wouldn't stop clenching. My thoughts were sprinting laps inside my skull. I need to move. I need to run. I need to get the hell out of here. The truth was brutally simple. I was too wound up, too wired, too damned panicked to breathe the same air as this guy for even one more second. My body was screaming for motion, escape, anything that wasn't this alley, this pressure, this mess spiraling out of control. Marjorie stood up beside me, swaying slightly, her hand brushing mine like a question. "Cody, where are you going?" she asked softly. I didn't know. But standing still felt like death. Running, even blindly, felt like survival. "We're going home," I stammered. "Yours or mine?" she asked concernedly. "Mine." "Come on, let's get out of here," I rushed her to her feet. Joseph stepped closer, his voice rising, that scratchy panic simmering just beneath the surface. "Whoa, whoa. Better sit your asses down," he barked, like he actually had some authority over us. No chance in hell. The more he talked, the more I noticed every twitch, every frantic scratch at his neck, every muttered curse about us ruining everything. He radiated the exact kind of energy that made you want to sprint in the opposite direction, paranoid, unstable, ready to snap. Sorry, Joseph. But we have to watch a movie together, I said, tossing out the lie with the ease of someone who'd been improvising his whole damn life. Improvising to survive, really? He narrowed his eyes at me, suspicious. What movie? I went with the first thing that had ever genuinely moved me. American Beauty, I blurted. The film that somehow managed to keep my attention from start to finish, rare as hell back then. Joseph blinked. Never seen it. You should. It's amazing, I said, a shudder rippling down my spine. Mentioning the film was fine, but thinking of Kevin Spacey did something foul to the air. I swear, even recalling his name made everything feel colder. And speaking of cold, Joseph had this bizarre aura, like he could drop the temperature of a room just by existing in it. You know how some people brighten a place when they walk in? Yeah, this guy did the absolute opposite. I didn't trust him. Not his twitching. Not his tone. Not his sudden appearances from the shadows. And definitely not the way he was looking at Marjorie. See you soon. I know you'll be back in a week, he cackled, that smug, conniving little grin stretching across his face like he'd already won. God, that face. Easily top contender for the most punchable face in history award, the kind of face only someone who'd never been told no in their entire life could develop. You could practically smell the entitlement on him, sour and stale like spoiled milk. My blood boiled so fast it hurt. Meanwhile, my own childhood was a damn far cry from whatever cushioned fairy tale he grew up in. Belts. Extension cords. Things that left marks you had to learn to hide on your own. But in Hollywood? Nobody wanted to hear any of that. Trauma wasn't marketable unless it made for a juicy interview clip. All they cared about was the next script, the next role, the next fabricated piece of perfection they could wring out of you. Some days it made me feel like I was about 3 seconds from losing my mind. Other days, well, thoughts of bridges came and went. But I could never do it. Not because I didn't feel the impulse, oh, it was there, gnawing at the edges on the darkest nights, but because the idea of standing at the edge of anything higher than 6 feet made my knees lock. Heights scared the hell out of me. So instead, I just stood there in that alley, my fists clenched, my jaw tight, watching Joseph slink back into whatever shadow he crawled out of. He thought he'd see us again. He thought he had us figured out. He had no idea what kind of storm he'd just stepped into. Chapter 9, Parental Visit. My parents suddenly decided that this was the perfect time to pay me a visit. I hadn't told them about Marjorie, and I sure as hell hadn't mentioned our shared usage of heroin. If they found out, they'd both have aneurysms on the spot. I paced the apartment, heart rattling in my chest, trying to imagine how I was going to hide all of this. The coke was still thundering through my bloodstream, making the walls tilt and breathe like the place was alive. Great timing, Mom and Dad, I muttered under my breath, running a shaking hand through my hair. The worst part? They always showed up unannounced when my life was at its absolute lowest, like they had some twisted sixth sense for disaster. And right now, disaster was sitting everywhere, in the air, in my veins, in the damn carpet. I glanced at Marjorie. We need to clean this place up, I whispered. Fast. Her pupils were still blown wide, but she nodded with a frantic determination. Even in her state, she understood that my parents walking in on this scene would be a nuclear-level event. Outside, I heard the elevator ding. Too late. They rang the doorbell and I anxiously opened the door. It was an oak frame with wear and tear from all the years of use. Hey, Ma, I nearly muttered. Don't you, hey, Ma, me, Cody Heller, she huffed, every syllable laced with irritation. She was one of those formal pieces of shit who demanded ma'am and sir like it was the law of the land. It was aggravating as hell. She said my full name like it was a curse she'd been forced to memorize, an exhale of pure annoyance. Honestly, she was always pissed about something. If there wasn't a fire to put out, she'd start one just so she had something to complain about. And the wildest part? I still had no idea how my father put up with her. The man had the patience of a saint or the emotional range of a brick. Maybe both. I forced a smile anyway, the tight kind that hid more than it showed. Good to see you too, Mom. Her eyes scanned the apartment like she was searching for evidence of a crime. And, well, if she looked hard enough, she'd find several. Oh, my. You both smoke? She gasped, clutching her pearls the way only a woman with a permanent stick up her spine could. Her eyes were locked on the Marlboro pack sitting on Marjorie's nightstand like it was a live grenade. I felt the words fuck off crawl all the way up my throat, burning for release. But I swallowed them down because nothing good ever came from saying exactly what I felt to her. That never ended well. Not once. Marjorie froze beside me, guilty by association, while my mother stared at the cigarettes as if they were proof of my lifelong moral decay. I forced the fakest smile imaginable. Yeah, Mom. Shocking, right? Inside, though? I was already done with this conversation. I thought you had quit at 21, my father finally said, his voice low and heavy, the way thunder sounds right before it cracks open the sky. He was always the quiet one, quiet but violent, a combination that kept me on edge my entire childhood. He never needed to yell, a single look from him could make me feel like I'd done something unforgivable. And if he did speak? It was usually to remind me I wasn't worth the air I breathed. Memories flickered through my mind like a stuttering film reel. That time he withheld my food unless I kissed his damn shoes. God, those ugly loafers, brown, creased, smelling faintly of mildew and whatever hell his job dragged through the house. I remembered kneeling, trembling, pressing my lips against them because I was too terrified to refuse. Too terrified to say what I really thought. They always told me I had nearly destroyed their marriage, that I was despicable, like some curse they'd been forced to drag around for 18 years. I cleared my throat, trying to keep my voice steady. Yeah, I muttered, well, things change. Marjorie squeezed my hand under the table, a quiet lifeline. My parents, meanwhile, stared at me like I had personally resurrected every disappointment they'd ever felt. And honestly, I felt 12 years old again. Marge, would you please make my parents an avocado melt? I asked, trying not to sound as nervous as I felt. Both of my parents perked up like I just announced dinner service at a 5-star restaurant. They were extremely picky eaters, painfully picky. Someone once told me it was an autism thing, but honestly, I always chalked it up to them having the culinary curiosity of damp cardboard. Unless the food was fried, they wouldn't touch it. If it sizzled? If it crackled? They'd pounce on it like starving hyenas. My dad's all-time favorite meal was fried chicken, extra crispy, soaked in enough oil to make a cardiologist pass out. My mother's weakness was fried dumplings. As a result, our kitchen growing up was stocked with oil like we were preparing for the apocalypse. Other families collected spices or fine china. We collected gallon jugs of cooking oil. We were like P. Diddy, except instead of having 1,000 bottles of baby lotion, we had 100 bottles of canola oil lined up like soldiers. Yeah. I know. Maybe too soon. My bad. My father's obsession was so intense that if my mother ever forgot to buy the canola oil, he would lose his mind. Not just yelling, physical. He'd wrench her into chokeholds, knuckles white, squeezing until she begged for release. It was a ritual of dominance, the kind you never forget, even if you desperately want to. If you're reading this, Dad? Straight to hell. Marjorie sliced the avocados with a steady hand, layering them over the warm chicken she'd crisped to perfection. The smell drifted through the room, rich, buttery, familiar. She plated everything neatly, cleaner than any server at that rundown diner ever managed, and carried it over to the table with a small, nervous smile. Our table. It wasn't much: scarred wood, one wobbly leg, a couple of rings from coffee cups neither of us ever remembered setting down, but the moment she set the plates there, it felt like more than just furniture. It felt claimed, lived in, ours. "Shall we eat, Mother?" I asked, letting the irritation bleed through just enough to make my point. Her goddamn obsession with etiquette always made me feel like some stranger passing through her life instead of her son. She looked at me with that tight-lipped disapproval she'd perfected over the years, the kind that said I was still the runt of the family no matter how old I'd gotten. She sat down anyway, smoothing the napkin across her lap as though we were at some charity gala instead of my cramped apartment. My father followed, heavy steps and heavier silence. Marjorie lingered beside me, her hand brushing mine for half a second, just enough to steady me before the storm. Sure," I muttered, caught completely off guard. My eyes flicked toward Marjorie, then back to my father, who was already giving me that expectant look, the one that felt like a spotlight and a choke chain at the same time. "Who should say it?" I asked, hoping, praying, that he'd volunteer himself for once. But of course not. "I want you to say it, son," he declared, puffed up pride swelling in his voice as if he'd just knighted me. He always did this, shoved me center stage without warning, without mercy. He even put me on the spot at Grandma's funeral, and she was the only one in the family who ever treated me like a human being. My stomach twisted. Marjorie gave me a tiny, encouraging nod. My mother folded her hands primly, waiting for me to perform. And my father leaned back, satisfied that he'd once again engineered the most awkward moment imaginable. I cleared my throat, scrambling for words that didn't sound entirely blasphemous, or furious. "Dear Father, we come before thee to offer our gratitude for this generous meal. Please help us to be wise in our lives and not take the easy route. No matter what. Amen." I struggled out the words. I had never really prayed to a higher power. I never saw the need to. Religion has too many goddamn rules. I consider myself a libertine. I believe certain laws deserve to be broken. "Very good prayer, son. He is proud of you," he said, patting me on the back. The gesture should have felt warm, even kind, but it didn't. Deep down, it landed with the weight of condescension. Like I'd just passed some arbitrary test I hadn't wanted to take in the first place. I nodded stiffly, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes, and turned my attention to the food in front of me. The table was quiet now, but the tension hummed beneath the surface, impossible to ignore. "How do you like the food?" I asked, already regretting the words the moment they left my mouth. Of course, that was a mistake. My mother immediately launched into her usual tirade: dry chicken, not enough salt, the bread slightly undercooked, the avocado too firm. Every sentence dripped with irritation, each complaint stacked neatly atop the last like bricks in some endless wall of nagging. I sat there, jaw tight, nodding along, knowing there was no escape. It wasn't about the food. It never was. It was about something else, some eternal dissatisfaction she carried like a badge of honor, and I was just the unlucky audience. It was around 8 p.m. when they finally left, the apartment sinking back into quiet. My mother planted one last kiss on my forehead, a gesture I recognized instantly. She'd done it 100 times when I was a kid, and it had always annoyed the living hell out of me. Even now, years later, it felt the same, overbearing, suffocating, a reminder that no matter how old I got, some things never changed. I rubbed the spot where her lips had pressed, feeling a mix of nostalgia and irritation simmering in my chest. That was a doozy, I painfully sighed. I honestly wouldn't have minded if I was to die at that moment. Everything felt trite and pointless. So I turned to my best friend instead. And no, it wasn't Gilbert. It was the heroin. The only thing that never left me, never argued, never demanded I get my act together. It wrapped itself around me like a warm blanket, whispering that everything was fine, that none of it mattered, that I didn't have to feel a damn thing if I didn't want to. Everyone else eventually got fed up, my friends, my co-workers, even the people who swore they'd always be there. One by one they peeled away, sick of the chaos, the outbursts, the way every good moment with me eventually turned to ash. But the heroine never complained. Never walked out. Never judged. Why would I care about losing people when I could just blur it all out, erase the edges of the world, and pretend none of it ever happened? That was the trap. And I fell into it willingly. Chapter 10, Gilbert and Therapy. Gilbert talked me into going to therapy. Not for the drugs, not for the drinking, those were symptoms, not the disease. It was because there were nights when I'd get so wasted I could feel that thin line between anger and violence disappearing. I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of waking up one morning and realizing I'd actually hurt someone. Or worse. And I'm not a peaceful person. You already know that. I've always carried this fuse inside me, short, frayed, sparking at the slightest touch. When liquor gets involved, that fuse turns into a live wire. Therapy wasn't some heroic step on my part, it was damage control. Gilbert knew it, and on some level, so did I. I didn't want to end up on the news. I didn't want blood on my hands. So I went. Not because I believed in healing or redemption or any of that sentimental crap. But because the alternative scared me more than the truth. Marjorie supported my going to therapy. She didn't nag, didn't guilt trip, didn't lecture, she just showed up. On that first day, she sat beside me in the waiting room, her knee brushing mine, her fingers tracing circles on my palm like she was trying to keep me grounded. And honestly, I needed it. I had plenty of issues. The kind you can't just drown in booze or bury under a needle. The kind that sit on your chest at night and whisper every stupid thing you've ever done. She didn't pretend I was fine. She didn't pretend she could fix me. But she believed I could do something other than self-destruct, and that alone made the room feel a little less suffocating. When the therapist finally called my name, I felt like I was walking into a goddamn courtroom. But Marjorie squeezed my hand and said, "Go. I'm right here when you're done." And for the first time in a long time, I actually went. "Tyler, would you please introduce yourself?" the head therapist asked, turning toward a guy whose straw-blonde hair looked like it had been cut with a lawnmower. He blinked slowly, like he was waking up from a 3-day nap. His whole vibe screamed goofy as hell, but I kept that thought locked behind my teeth. This wasn't the place to start shit, and I knew it. Not with everyone already sitting in a circle like we were about to summon some therapy demon. Tyler cleared his throat and stared at the floor as if it owed him money. "I'm Tyler," he muttered. "I get angry. A lot." I almost snorted. "Buddy, welcome to the damn club." But I stayed quiet, hands folded, trying to look like I belonged in a room full of people who were trying, really trying, to get better. "Does anyone else suffer from this?" he asked, curious. I lifted my hand all the way up, higher than anyone else in that cramped little room. If I was going to be judged, then fine, judge the hell out of me. The world had been doing that since I was 5, so why stop now? Even back then, I never had a shred of privacy. Not a moment to breathe without someone turning it into a comedy sketch at my expense. People still quoted that scene like it was the funniest thing ever filmed, Grandpa Wilcox holding up a trout the size of a toddler and booming, "My, what a big one." It was obviously about the fish, but no, everyone and their grandmother acted like he was talking about a damn dick. They'd repeat it non-stop, circling me on the playground like vultures laughing their lungs out. I couldn't go a day without someone whispering it behind my back or shouting it across the yard like it was the punchline of all punchlines. So sitting in that therapy room, raising my hand? Yeah, this was nothing. I'd already lived through the humiliations people would write memoirs about. I cleared my throat and tried to sit a little straighter, though my nerves were buzzing like live wires. "What is your situation, Cody?" "Wait, aren't you the former child actor?" he asked, eyes widening like he'd just spotted a celebrity at Disneyland. "Yeah, I am," I admitted, already regretting it. "But don't let that affect how you see me, though. I'm only a human being. Flesh and bone. Muscles and nerves." It came out shaky, a little too rehearsed, like I'd said some version of it 1,000 times before. Because I had. "I won't. I promise," he replied, letting out a long, contemplative sigh, except it wasn't the kind of sigh people make when they understand you. It was the kind they make when they think you're being dramatic. As if I'd just made some tongue-in-cheek joke. As if my whole life wasn't the punchline already. "Now, who here struggles with a drug or alcohol addiction?" he asked, his tone dropping into something solemn and performative. Many depressed people turn to substances to cope with their issues. They lead a path straight to their demise. That word hit me wrong. Demise. It sounded theatrical, like something a Victorian doctor would whisper over a fainting widow. I clenched my jaw. I hated that word. I wasn't marching toward some tragic ending. I wasn't planning to off myself with a needle. I was careful, meticulous, even. I knew my limits. I knew my dosages. Hell, I'd overdosed at 23, and all it earned me was a skull-splitting headache and 2 days of withdrawals that felt like a fever dream from hell. No bright light. No angels. Just me, the toilet, and a promise to never mix suppliers again. So no, I didn't buy his dramatics. Not for a second. I don't see the point of this group. You can't fix what's been broken too many times, I admitted. He just gasped and the whole room glared at me in annoyance. "Okay, I'll stay. But this group better fix me," I muttered, my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. For a moment, the whole room went still. Even the air felt heavy, like everyone was bracing for something to shatter. Tyler's eyes widened. The head therapist leaned forward, his voice steady but carrying that quiet urgency only professionals seem to master. "Cody, what you're feeling is serious. And you're not alone with it. But I need you to hear me clearly, there are other options. We're here to help you find them." That steadiness in his tone only made the pressure in my chest twist even harder. My hands trembled in my lap, and I dug my nails into my palms just to feel something sharp, something real. "You don't have to handle this alone," he added, softer now. "Not anymore." "Good to know," I muttered, disbelief dripping off every word. I slumped deeper into my chair, staring past the circle like I could glare my way out of the room. Therapy had never done a damn thing for me. Not the talking, not the breathing exercises, not the journaling, not the inner child bullshit. My real therapy? Heroin when the world went gray. Cigarettes when I needed something to burn besides myself. Alcohol to knock the noise down to something survivable. Pot made me paranoid, so that was a no-go. And those cursed morning glory seeds? I still felt sick thinking about them. Hours of vomiting. Zero visuals. No epiphany. Just me, hugging a toilet and then eating a burrito that tasted like a religious experience. That was it. That was the whole journey. And now here I was, in a folding chair in a beige room, expected to believe these strangers were going to fix what drugs couldn't even numb anymore. Yeah. Right. Marge was on her feet the second I walked into the waiting room. Her eyes were wide, worried, searching my face for even a sliver of hope. I didn't give her one. I sank into the plastic chair beside her, elbows on my knees, breath shaking. When she asked how it went, I didn't have the strength, or the patience, to sugarcoat anything. "God awful," I spat, the word ripping out of me like it burned. They act like they understand an addict's mind. They're not fucking doctors. My voice cracked into a full-throated roar. The sound bounced hard off the walls, trembling through the cheap artwork and the receptionist's desk. For a split second, the whole room seemed to flinch. Then everything inside me just collapsed. I folded into myself and sobbed, loud, ugly, desperate. The kind of crying that had no dignity left to protect. The kind that only happens when you're dangling over the edge and your fingers are slipping. This wasn't sustainable. This wasn't survivable. Something had to give, and fast. Because if it didn't, I was going to shatter, or lose my mind completely. And perhaps I did lose my mind that day. It didn't feel like a dramatic snap or some cinematic break. It was quieter than that, like a thin wire inside me finally giving way after years of tension. One moment I was sobbing in that hard plastic chair, and the next it felt as if something had slipped out of alignment in a way I couldn't undo. The colors in the room seemed too bright. The buzzing from the overhead lights drilled straight into my skull. Every breath dragged like sandpaper. Marge kept talking, soft, frantic, but her voice sounded like it was coming from the bottom of a swimming pool. I could see her lips moving, see the fear in her eyes, but none of it registered the way it should have. I wasn't inside myself anymore. I was watching from the doorway of my own mind, feeling everything and nothing all at once. If that isn't losing your mind, I don't know what is. She called the psych hospital Mallory Wayne's that day. A stupid nickname. A careless one. But it hit me harder than any insult ever could. For a while, I treated it like a betrayal. Like she'd tossed my pain into a joke box and wound the crank just to see me twitch. Every time I replayed it in my head, the anger scattered through me like broken glass. Sharp. Pointless. Endless. But anger has a way of corroding the person who carries it. And I was already rusted through. So eventually, slowly, painfully, I let it go. Not because she deserved forgiveness in some grand moral sense, but because I couldn't keep living with that acid eating through my ribs. I had enough poison inside me already. I didn't need to nurture another dose. Forgiving her was less a gift to her and more a quiet mercy for myself. Chapter 11, Marjorie's Mom Pops By. I met Marjorie's mom that day, and she was the complete opposite of mine. No yelling. No cutting remarks. No constant tension that made you feel like a mistake just for breathing. She smiled gently and asked, almost casually, if I wanted to help her bake chocolate chip cookies. I couldn't resist. It was the kind of offer you don't say no to. Warmth in its purest, simplest form, hands in flour, the smell of melting chocolate filling the kitchen, laughter without judgment. A moment of normalcy I didn't know I was starving for. And yes, I know what you're thinking, that's the Godfather reference, right? Yeah, maybe it was. But in that moment, it didn't matter. It was real. It was a little escape from the chaos of my own head. You know, Marjorie is thinking about marrying you soon, right? She said, her voice gentle but startlingly direct. The words hit me so hard I choked on my white wine, spraying it across the counter like some cheap sitcom character. My face burned with embarrassment. I'll clean that up, I blurted, already reaching for a towel. I didn't want to add even a single ounce of stress to her shoulders, not after everything she'd gone through, not after losing that jerk of a father. The last thing she needed was me making a mess on top of it all. Let me, she insisted, already snatching a wipe and sweeping away the wine, and what looked like remnants of last night's dinner grease, without a hint of irritation. Oh, thank you so much. I exhaled, feeling the tension drain from my shoulders for a moment. That peace lasted exactly 3 seconds. The cookies, she cried just as the oven began its shrill beeping. Oh, shit. I barked, scrambling toward it. Oh, shit is right. Look at this burnt mess, she laughed nervously, tugging the tray out. The cookies were an alarming shade of, well, feces brown. Definitely not the warm, golden kind you'd put on a holiday card. From the back of the house, Marge's voice cut through the kitchen. How are those cookies going, you two? I swallowed hard. Well, there's been a little accident. You burned the cookies, didn't you? She called out, full of that all-knowing tone she had perfected over the years. Yes. I am so sorry, I muttered, disappointment flooding me. I couldn't even handle something as simple as baking. What the hell was wrong with me? It's okay. I can make some on my own, she teased, nudging us with a grin that softened the sting of our baking disaster. Her light-heartedness almost made me forget the charred tray still cooling on the counter. But something inside me twisted anyway, some ugly, familiar knot of doubt, and before I could stop myself, the words slipped out. I turned to her, voice low. Why would you even want to marry me? The question hung in the air like cigarette smoke. I mean, I'm a junkie. A loser. I don't have anything to offer you. The truth of it scraped at my throat. Most mornings I couldn't even drag myself out of bed without feeling like the world was pressing a boot to my ribcage. And she was talking about marriage, as if I were worth something. She stepped closer, gentle but sure, and rested her hand against my arm. You may be a junkie, but it doesn't have to be your defining trait, she said, each word steady enough to anchor me for a moment. I stared at the floor, swallowing a breath that felt impossible to get down. I guess. I just don't see what I have to offer, I muttered, the sigh dragging out of me like a bag full of bricks. She tilted her head, studying me with that maddening mixture of compassion and stubbornness she always carried. You offer more than you think, she whispered. You love hard. You care more than anybody gives you credit for. And when you let yourself? You're kind. Her thumb brushed my knuckles, a small gesture that somehow felt like a lifeline. I'm not asking you to be perfect, she added softly. I'm asking you to try. I leaned in and pressed my lips to hers, soft, brief, careful. Her mother was only a few feet away, humming over a mixing bowl, so we kept it tame, nothing more than a tender promise whispered through touch. Even so, the warmth of it spread through me, settling somewhere deep and aching. It satisfied, yes, but it also stirred something heavier, something that made my pulse kick against my ribs. I wanted to hold her without restraint, to feel her warmth against mine, to give her every quiet part of me I usually hid from the world. But I swallowed it down, kept my breathing steady, and pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. She smiled, a small, knowing thing, and squeezed my hand once, as if to say later, without ever speaking the word. She pressed me back onto the mattress with a confidence that startled me in the best way, her palms braced on my shoulders, her hair spilling around us like a curtain. The moment felt charged, but not in a way that crossed any lines, more like a rush of closeness, of trust, of two people finally letting themselves breathe around each other. I love you, she whispered, her voice so soft it barely reached my ears. I love you more, I murmured back, heart hammering. No way, she laughed, this wonderfully ridiculous little sound that cracked through every dark thought I'd been carrying. It was goofy and bright and completely hers. But none of that mattered. Not in that moment, where time slowed just enough to make me feel human again. And certainly not now, when the memory still sits warm in my chest like a small, stubborn flame refusing to go out. Chapter 12, Disownation. We were bored one Saturday in September with absolutely nothing to do and decided to trip on Robocoff. It wasn't some grand plan or wild craving. It was just that familiar, dangerous mix of restlessness and curiosity, the kind that makes bad ideas look tempting. Marjorie sat cross-legged on the carpet, shaking the bottle like it was a snow globe. You sure? She asked, even though she already knew the answer. I shrugged, staring at the ceiling as if it could offer wisdom. Sure enough. So we took the pills, washed them down with warm tap water, and waited for the world to lose its balance. And it did. Slowly at first, then all at once, as if someone loosened the hinges on reality and let it swing crooked for a while. The come-up hit like a slow-rolling wave, thick and syrupy. At first it was only a slight shift, edges softening, colors warming, the room taking on this velvety hum that made everything feel twice as heavy and twice as far away. Marjorie lay beside me on the living room floor, staring at the ceiling fan as though it were delivering some sacred prophecy. "Do you feel that?" she whispered. I did. A deep, liquid detachment, as if my soul were floating a few inches outside my body, watching me from an angle that didn't exist in sober geometry. My arms tingled. My legs felt hollow. Breathing became something I had to remember to do rather than something that happened on its own. About 20 minutes in, the room began to tilt, not in a scary way, just in that dreamlike, underwater wobble that makes you unsure whether you're sitting still or drifting sideways. Marjorie laughed suddenly, a breathy, bewildered sound. It sounded incredibly tinny. "You look like you're melting into the carpet, Cody." I tried to respond, but the words got stuck behind my teeth. Language suddenly felt like a complex math problem I hadn't studied for. Instead, I lifted my hand and waved it through the air. It left a faint trail, a soft, ghostly afterimage, that made me gasp. Everything had an echo. Not a sound echo. A movement echo, a visual lag as if reality were buffering. The walls breathed. The shadows stretched. The lamp glowed with this impossible halo, like it had swallowed a tiny sun. And then came the dissociation, gentle at first, then total. My thoughts drifted away from each other, slow and fragmented, like puzzle pieces spaced too far apart. I could feel myself slipping into that DXM, third-person, state where I wasn't Cody anymore, just someone watching Cody, narrating his life from a few feet behind his skull. Marjorie turned to me with pupils like black oceans. "Cody. I think we broke the universe." And for a moment, I believed her. The room looked infinite, stretching in subtle, impossible ways. The clock on the wall was stuck between seconds, ticking without moving. Time was syrup. Reality was elastic. And neither of us knew where the edge was anymore. I tried standing up and immediately collapsed like a marionette with cut strings. The floor felt alive beneath me, warm, breathing, shifting, almost like some ancient creature waiting to swallow me whole. Every time I tried to lift myself, some invisible force tugged me backward, dragging me without moving me, as if gravity itself had become a prankster. When I finally managed to rise, it didn't feel like standing. It felt like phasing. One moment I was on the ground, the next I was upright with no memory of the transition. And when I walked, if you could even call it that, it was like teleporting in short, glitchy bursts. I'd think about moving, and suddenly I'd be 5 feet away, my brain lagging seconds behind my body. "This is too strong." I tried to shout, but all that came out was a warped, underwater gurgle. Even I couldn't understand myself. My heart hammered. My skin pulsed. Every inhale felt like it took an hour, and every exhale felt like it escaped from someone else's lungs. And the fear hit, raw and primal. I genuinely thought I was going to fatally OD on a drug teenagers swigged in parking lots. What a humiliating obituary that would have been. Not even heroin, not coke, cough syrup. Something you could buy next to Pepto-Bismol. My vision rippled, bending the corners of the room. The walls stretched upward like skyscrapers. The ceiling felt impossibly high, like the sky itself had replaced the plaster. "Cody, Cody, breathe," Marjorie said, but her voice echoed in 3 layers, each one slightly delayed, like it was being run through a broken stereo. I grabbed her arm, or tried to, my hand passed through the air in slow motion, leaving a shimmering trail behind it. "I can't, I think I'm dying." But I wasn't sure if I said it, thought it, or hallucinated it. The line between the three had completely dissolved. Somehow, against every odds stacked against our rattled brains, we made it. By the end, we were worn out like an old pair of shoes, creased, weather-beaten, and barely holding together at the seams. Every muscle ached, every thought felt wrung dry, yet the world finally stopped melting and twisting around us. We'd survived our own ridiculous, chaotic hero's journey through a cheap, legal hallucination. And honestly, Hunter S. Thompson would have been proud. If anyone understood the appeal of staring insanity dead in the eyes just to see if it blinked, it was him. The man turned chemical madness into art. Into poetry. Into something that made the rest of us look tame by comparison. But he was gone, shot himself in 2005. He wasn't young, but he wasn't old either. He died in that strange middle ground where legends seem to exit on their own terms. Then again, don't all the greats? They burn too brightly, too fast. And the flame always chooses its own moment to go out. Chapter 13, Tweak Some More. Being bored out of our minds and with absolutely nothing productive to cling to, we crossed another line. Curiosity mixed with recklessness is a dangerous cocktail, and we drank it in one gulp. So we decided to try some glass. We wanted to understand the appeal, the obsession, the way the tweakers on the street would treat a single hit like it was the Holy Grail. They'd claw at one another, scream, threaten, kill if someone so much as touched their stash. I'm not exaggerating. I'd seen that kind of desperation with my own two eyes. And somewhere in our drug-softened logic, we thought, well, why do they love it so damn much? What's the big secret? It was the kind of question only two bored, chemically adventurous idiots could ask with a straight face. Shall we? I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of thrill and stupidity. I took out my heroin pipe, my old, loyal companion, and packed it to the brim with crystal meth. The shards glittered under the dim lamp like murderous little diamonds. There was no going back now. Marjorie stared at the pipe, her pupils wide with a cocktail of fear and fascination. You're really doing this? She whispered, almost reverently. I nodded. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the lighter. When the flame kissed the glass, the meth melted into a swirling white vapor, crawling around the bowl like a living thing. It looked almost elegant. Beautiful, even. That's how they get you, I should have thought. But I didn't. Instead, I brought the pipe to my lips. One inhale. Just one. And the world tore itself open. Holy shit. That hit like a damn train, I muttered, my fingers twitching as if electric currents were running through them. I tried to still them, God, I tried, but they wouldn't obey. They danced, jittered, alive in a way my body wasn't ready for, each tremor reminding me that the line between thrill and terror was getting thinner by the second. The bastards had a mind of their own. I let that thought hang in the air for a moment, watching my fingers twitch like nervous insects. They skittered across my palms, flexing, curling, refusing every command I tried to give them. Calm down, I whispered internally, but it only made them tremble harder. As if the pressure itself had seeped into my bones and taken up residency there. It felt like standing in front of a runaway train, knowing full well it wasn't slowing down. It was going to crash, and it was going to crash hard. The realization hit me like a lungful of cold air. I could feel the momentum building. That awful, unstoppable inertia of a moment spiraling out of my control. My hands kept trembling, jittering like faulty wiring. And the rest of me wasn't far behind. Every breath tightened, every thought sharpened to a single point. This is happening. There was no slowing it, no gentle landing. Whatever was coming was already mid-flight. And all I could do was brace myself for the impact. Are you feeling alright, Marge? I asked, tweaking like a bitch. She clutched her chest, eyes wide and glassy, breath coming in frantic bursts. No, I feel like I'm dying. My heart is beating so fast, she shouted, panic sharpening every syllable. Her voice cracked, and for a split second I saw something raw. Not the reckless bravado we'd both been riding on. But the kind of fear that makes your entire world shrink to the size of your next heartbeat. I wanted to believe she could push through it. I wanted to tell myself she was stronger than the rush tearing through her veins. But as I watched her shaking, watched her pulse hammer at her neck like it wanted out, I wasn't so sure anymore. Concern twisted in my gut, cold and heavy, overpowering whatever false confidence I'd been clinging to. "I'm so sorry, honey." Genuinely, I stammered, the words slipping out between clenched teeth and jittery breaths. She shot me a look sharp enough to cut. "You're a piece of shit for getting me into this," she muttered, annoyance simmering under her panic. I swallowed hard. I never claimed to be a good person. For a moment she just stared at me. Then her expression softened, trembling around the edges. "I love you," she whispered, stammering just like I had. I couldn't help the small, warm smile that broke through. "I love you too, baby girl." She straightened a little, confidence flickering in her eyes despite everything. "I love you more." I snorted. "Bullshit. Didn't your parents teach you not to lie?" Her comeback hit with no humor, no hesitation. Just the raw truth she knew would land hardest. "Didn't your parents teach you not to do drugs?" The words cut deeper than I expected. I looked away, jaw tight. "They did. They wanted too much from me. You can't blame me for turning to drugs." The confession hung in the air between us, heavy and trembling. The kind of truth that didn't fix anything, but at least explained why everything hurt the way it did. "My father was the same way as yours," she said, her voice flat. So flat it felt like all the color had drained out of the room. I let out a tired, bitter sigh. "I'll bet he was," I muttered, already bracing for whatever came next. She didn't hold back. "He told me that he was the only person I should follow in life. That I should grow up and be just like him." The sheer arrogance of it made my blood boil. My hands clenched, shaking for an entirely different reason now. God, what a damn prick. I snapped, anger flaring hot in my chest. If the bastard were still alive, I would have gone after him myself. Dragged all his poison into the light. Shown him exactly what I thought of men who tried to shape their daughters like puppets. But he was already in the ground. And you can't beat the hell out of a corpse. No matter how much they deserve it. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, catching the sinister curl of my smile. I didn't answer right away. My mind was already miles away. Locked onto one man, one name, one festering irritation I couldn't shake. Harvey. Fucking Gilmore. The hack who'd taken my legacy, my blood and sweat creation, and turned it into a dumpster fire with a studio budget. I could practically feel my jaw tighten as the memory resurfaced. The remake's glorious 57% on Rotten Tomatoes. And that top critic review, the one etched into my brain like a curse. What the hell did I just watch? Making the story paranormal was the film's biggest mistake. It aims for spectacle, but delivers none of the magic of the original film. Every time I thought about it, I felt the urge to put my fist through something. Harvey had insisted on complete control over production. Called himself an auteur with his nose so high in the air he could smell the stratosphere. But everyone knew what he really was. A glorified control freak who blamed the world when his delusions didn't pan out. I sucked in a slow breath, forcing the anger down just enough to speak. "Just thinking about a guy who deserves a punch to the throat," I finally said, the smile sharpening. "Harvey?" she asked, her voice tightening with that anxious little edge she could never hide. She knew exactly who I meant. Knew the history. Knew the rage. Knew the way Harvey Gilmore's name alone could flip a switch in me. And yeah, she knew damn well I could beat his ass into next week if it ever came to that. The bastard stood at a proud 5'6", all false bravado and cheap cologne. Strutting around like God himself had appointed him king of cinema. I let out a low, humorless chuckle. Yeah. Harvey. The name tasted bitter on my tongue. I could practically see him in my mind. Standing on apple boxes to look taller behind the scenes. Barking orders no one respected. Trying to direct a legacy he never understood. My smile sharpened, slow and dangerous. Relax. I'm not gonna do anything stupid, I said, though even I wasn't sure if that was true. But the thought of him. The ego, the incompetence, the way he butchered everything I built. It lit a fire in my chest that felt damn near volcanic. I'm gonna arrange a meeting with the cocksucker. No bodyguards, no one to save him. Just him and I muttered, the words coming out low and gravelly. The meth had me vibrating like a live wire. My jaw clenched so hard it felt welded shut, and my thoughts fired off like bullets ricocheting in a steel room. Rage, paranoia, bravado, it all bled together into one pulsing, electric urge to do something, anything, to stop feeling powerless for even one damn second. Marjorie looked at me with a mixture of fear and awe. Cody, who the hell are you talking about? I didn't answer. I just kept pacing, grinding my teeth, adrenaline pouring through me like battery acid. In my mind, his face appeared, smirking, untouchable, smug beyond reason. I wanted that face to look afraid for once. Just once. He thinks he's invincible, I growled, fists tightening, knuckles whitening. I'll show him exactly how mortal he is. It didn't matter that I didn't even have a plan. On meth, plans didn't exist, only missions, sharp-edged and glowing. And right then, mine felt holy. Holy shit, are you actually going to do it? She whispered, terrified. Her voice cracked as she grabbed my arm, clinging to anything that could anchor me. Please don't. This isn't you. But it was me, at least the part of me that had been rotting for years. Yes. He ruined my legacy. It's only fair that I ruin his too, I muttered, each word tasting like rust. You're high right now. You could just wait it out, she pleaded, desperation spilling through every syllable. Fuck off, Marge. My hands curled into fists, and before I even thought about it, I slammed one into the wall behind that ridiculous painting of a hen laying an egg. People said it symbolized rebirth, transformation, whatever. All I saw was a metaphor for promises that never hatched. For dreams that suffocated before they ever saw daylight. The American dream works fine, if you're born already holding the deed. Me? I'd been clawing my way up from nothing my entire life, nails chipped down to the bone. I'm so terribly sorry, she sobbed, covering her mouth as if she could hold in the sound. Shut your mouth. Her tears stopped for a heartbeat, long enough for her anger to spark. Or what? You'll choke me out? She challenged, voice trembling but defiant. My jaw locked. You asked for it, I snarled, though I was yelling more at the universe than at her. There was a heavy, awful silence. I hope you die, she choked out. I let out a hollow, exhausted breath. I hope so too, I said, because in that moment, it was the truest thing I'd ever spoken. I dialed up Harvey's number to meet up alone and his cocaine tongue would not shut the fuck up. He told me that I was going to star in a die-hard spoof called Dynamite Hendrix. And get this, his catchphrase was bonsai. I blinked, unsure if I was hallucinating from the meth or just witnessing the absolute peak of Hollywood absurdity. Hendrix Seville? I repeated, letting the name roll around in my mouth like it was a bad joke. Near invincible? What the hell does that even mean? Harvey's voice bubbled with manic excitement. Exactly. He survives everything. Car crashes, explosions, shark attacks, you name it. The audience will love him. I could feel my patience fraying. So, the movie is basically Die Hard on steroids with a superhero twist and a name no one will remember? Bingo. And you're perfect for it. Think about the stunts, the action sequences, I don't feel I am young enough to be doing such roles anymore, I am off. Harvey, I don't do this for cheap thrills anymore. I want substance, not nonsense. There was a pause on the other end. I could practically hear his jaw tighten. Then, with the same manic energy, he said, "Trust me, Cody, substance sells in explosions now." Bonsai. I dropped the phone onto the grass, staring at the clear sky. My career had hit rock bottom, and somehow, Harvey was shoveling more dirt on top of it. But even in my twisted, drug-fueled haze, I had to admit, I was morbidly curious how far this train wreck could go. "Meet me at Cranberry Park, Mr. Gilmore," I forced out the most insincere politeness of my life. He seemed thrilled that I had asked him to meet me at the park. His Mercedes-Benz arrived and he practically ran over to me. I picked up a jagged rock that lay next to me and began my beating of him. I showed absolutely no mercy whatsoever. Harvey tried to fight back, but there's only so much power a manlet can have. He began bleeding profusely from his face and I broke his goddamn nose in the beating as well. He just bitched about how he would never hire me again. Good, I thought. After about 15 minutes he collapsed onto the ground. I hadn't killed him. I had just shown him what the consequences of being a control freak would lead to. I had no regrets whatsoever. Unfortunately, a jogger saw his bloodied body lying motionless on the ground and called the police on me. I had never before been arrested. The thought of going to prison and using their grimy-ass showers revolted me. The sirens arrived faster than I expected, blaring, echoing through the trees, bouncing around my skull like guilt I refused to claim. 2 cruisers skidded to a stop on the gravel path, and before I could even consider running, 3 officers rushed me with guns drawn. Hands where I can see them. I lifted them slowly, the jagged rock slipping from my fingers and thudding against the dirt. My pulse hammered, but not from fear, more from the drug crash after the rage, that hollow emptiness that always crawled back in. They shoved me against the hood of the cruiser, cold metal biting into my cheek. One of them cuffed me while another checked Harvey's mangled body. He groaned, still alive, still whining even through shattered cartilage. "You're under arrest for aggravated assault," the officer barked into my ear. His breath smelled like stale coffee and authority. Yeah, I get it," I muttered, as they hauled me upright. The jogger who had snitched stood off to the side, arms crossed, looking at me like I was an animal. Maybe I was. Maybe I had been for a long time. They shoved me into the back seat, the cuffs biting my wrists. As the door slammed shut, the reality finally settled in: county jail, fluorescent lights, concrete floors, and showers I wouldn't touch even if I were dipped in bleach first. My stomach twisted. I stared out the window as they pulled away from the park, Harvey's blood still drying on my knuckles. The officers chatted in the front like this was just another Tuesday. And maybe for them, it was. For me, it was the moment I realized I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. The moment violence stopped being an idea and became evidence. But even then, sitting in the back of that cruiser, wrists aching, freedom slipping, I felt no regret. Just the slow, sinking dread of someone who finally understood he had run out of places to hide. Chapter 14, Los Angeles vs. Heller. My trial drew eyes like moths to a bonfire, morbid curiosity mixed with the cheap thrill of watching a fallen star burn. It wasn't just the charges. It was the spectacle. Former Hollywood sweetheart. Current burnout. Unhinged addict caught on the downslope of fame. They ate it up like it was primetime television. The reporters camped outside the courthouse every morning, shouting my name as though I were still worth shouting for. My mugshot, hollow-cheeked, pupils blown, jaw tight with leftover rage, circulated online like some grotesque collectible. Inside the courtroom, the prosecution painted me as a menace, someone who snapped and could snap again. The defense tried to spin it as a moment of psychosis, a drug-induced lapse, a man desperate and spiraling. But I knew the truth. The methamphetamine didn't create the rage. It simply excavated it. Shoveled it out from the deepest corners of my mind and pushed it into the fractured spotlight. The same spotlight that once adored me. That had now tilted to reveal every crack. Every mistake. Every wasted opportunity. Every wasted year. I sat through testimony after testimony, numb, staring at the floor tiles as if they might swallow me whole. The judge looked at me like I was a cautionary tale. Harvey, face still bruised, bandaged nose crooked, milked every moment on the stand, trembling like the world's most fragile victim. Some people whispered that I deserved life. Others whispered that I deserved mercy. But all I could think was this. My youth had been spent surviving scripts, surviving sets, surviving addictions, yet I couldn't survive myself. The people of the city of Los Angeles versus Cody Heller. Superior Court of California, Criminal Division. Bailiff, all rise. The Superior Court of California, County of Los Angeles, is now in session. The Honorable Judge Mary Ann Wexler presiding. Judge Wexler, be seated. Calling case number LA 45291, the people of the city of Los Angeles versus Cody Heller. Mr. Heller is charged with 1 count of felony assault with a deadly weapon, 1 count of battery causing serious bodily injury, and 1 misdemeanor count of criminal threats. Are both sides ready? Prosecutor, Ms. Dwyer, ready for the people, Your Honor. Defense Attorney, Mr. Halpern, defense is ready. Judge Wexler, very well. Ms. Dwyer, your opening statement. Opening statements. Prosecutor. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the defendant, Cody Heller, was once a household name. A child actor adored by millions. But this trial is not about fame. It is about violence. On September 14, the defendant lured film director Harvey Gilmore to Cranberry Park under the false pretense of discussing a movie role. Mr. Gilmore arrived alone. What followed was not a meeting, it was an ambush. The defendant struck Mr. Gilmore repeatedly with a jagged rock. He broke the man's nose, fractured his cheekbone, and left him bloodied and unconscious in the grass. A jogger found Mr. Gilmore moments later, while the defendant stood over him, showing no remorse. Mr. Heller has a lengthy documented history of substance abuse, erratic behavior, and violent impulses. The people will show that this was a deliberate, premeditated act of vengeance. He wanted to hurt Mr. Gilmore, and he succeeded. Judge Wexler, thank you, Ms. Dwyer. Mr. Halpern? Defense Attorney. Ladies and gentlemen, the prosecution wants you to see Mr. Heller as a monster. They want you to ignore context, history, and the very real mental health crisis he was in. Mr. Heller struggled for years with addiction, cyclical depression, and a deteriorating sense of self-worth. On the day in question, he was not in his right mind. He was intoxicated, disoriented, and spiraling. This was not premeditation. This was a breakdown, a catastrophic collapse of a man already lost. You will hear that Mr. Gilmore provoked him for years with public criticism, professional sabotage, and cruel treatment during the production of Monsters in the Closet. Mr. Heller's anger was misguided, but it was not planned. He did not intend to cause lasting harm. At the end of this trial, you will see that Cody Heller needs treatment, not a prison cell. Prosecution case. Judge Wexler, Ms. Dwyer, call your first witness. Prosecutor, the people call Harvey Gilmore. Bailiff, sir, please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth? Gilmore, I do. Direct examination, Harvey Gilmore. Prosecutor, Mr. Gilmore, how do you know the defendant? Gilmore, we worked together on a film about 15 years ago. I directed him. Prosecutor, did you have contact with him prior to the incident? Gilmore, occasionally. He'd call about potential roles. I tried to help, but he wasn't reliable. Prosecutor, tell the court what happened on September 14th. Gilmore, he called me, very polite, said he wanted to discuss a project. I thought maybe he was getting his life together. So I agreed to meet him. At the park. Prosecutor, and when you arrived? Gilmore, he was already there. I walked over, and he picked up a rock and swung it. No warning. Nothing. Just rage. Prosecutor, could you defend yourself? Gilmore, he's stronger than he looks. And he was furious, wild-eyed. I tried to block him, but he hit my face, my ribs, God, the blood. I thought he was going to kill me. Prosecutor, how many times did he strike you? Gilmore, at least a dozen. Maybe more. I lost count. Prosecutor, thank you. No further questions. Cross-examination. Defense attorney, Mr. Gilmore, you mentioned trying to help Mr. Heller. Isn't it true that, during the filming of Monsters in the Closet, you publicly mocked him? Gilmore, I gave him direction. Defense attorney, direction? Or humiliation? You called him washed up in front of the entire crew, did you not? Gilmore, I may have said something like that. Defense attorney, did you also tell him, quote, your career is already 6 feet under, you're just too high to bury it? Gilmore, I don't recall the exact phrasing. Defense attorney, convenient. Prosecutor, objection, argumentative. Judge Wexler, sustained. Rephrase, Mr. Halprin. Defense attorney, of course, Your Honor. Mr. Gilmore, would you say your relationship with Mr. Heller was strained? Gilmore, yes. Defense attorney, and you agree he was clearly intoxicated during the incident? Gilmore, he seemed off. Defense attorney, off. Slurring, trembling, sweating? Gilmore, yes. Defense attorney, thank you. No further questions. Second witness, jogger, Kara Lindstrom. Prosecutor, Ms. Lindstrom, what did you see? Lindstrom, I was jogging. I saw a man on the ground, bleeding. And another man standing over him, holding something. Prosecutor, did you identify that man? Lindstrom, yes. It was the defendant. Prosecutor, what was his demeanor? Lindstrom, blank. Like he wasn't fully there. Defense attorney, no questions. Defense case. Judge Wexler, Mr. Halprin, call your first witness. Defense attorney, the defense calls Cody Heller. Direct examination, Cody Heller. Defense attorney, Cody, describe your state of mind that day. Heller, I wasn't thinking. Everything felt unreal. Like I wasn't in my own body. I was high, too high, and angry. Angry at myself, at my career, at the world. I didn't plan anything. I swear to God, I didn't. Defense attorney, what do you remember? Heller, flashes. I remember shouting. I remember him talking about some stupid spoof movie, laughing. And something snapped. I didn't go there to attack him. I went there because I was desperate. I just wanted someone to take me seriously again. Defense attorney, do you regret what happened? Heller, every day. Cross-examination. Prosecutor, Mr. Heller, didn't you tell your girlfriend, I'm gonna arrange a meeting with the cocksucker, no bodyguards, no one to save him? Heller, I might have said that. I was high. Prosecutor, did you or did you not say it? Heller, yes. Prosecutor, so you did intend to meet him alone? Heller, meeting him, yes. Hurting him. I wasn't thinking straight. Prosecutor, you brought a weapon. Heller, I picked it up off the ground. Prosecutor, because you were angry. Heller, because I wasn't myself. Prosecutor, yet you struck him again and again. Heller, I know. And I'm sorry. Prosecutor, no further questions. Closing arguments. Prosecutor. This was not an accident, not a misunderstanding, and not a cry for help. This was violence, deliberate, repeated, and brutal. Mr. Heller lured his victim, ambushed him, and beat him without mercy. Mental health struggles explain nothing. Addiction excuses nothing. The people ask for a guilty verdict on all counts. Defense Attorney. Cody Heller is not a monster. He is a broken man who needed help long before this happened. This was not premeditated. This was a collapse, a drug-fueled spiral culminating in tragedy, not intent. Find him guilty of what he did, not of what the prosecution imagines he planned. Consider humanity. Consider context. Consider mercy. The verdict. Judge Wexler, has the jury reached a verdict? Foreperson, we have, Your Honor. Judge Wexler, please read it. Foreperson. On count 1, assault with a deadly weapon, we find the defendant guilty. On count 2, battery causing serious bodily injury, we find the defendant guilty. On count 3, criminal threats, we find the defendant not guilty. Judge Wexler, Mr. Heller, sentencing will occur next month. Court is adjourned. Bailiff, all rise. The ride to Bartooth Prison felt like being ferried across a river of no return. The transport van was cramped, cold, and rattling like its bolts had given up on life years ago. My wrists were cuffed so tight they left red rings around the bone. Every bump in the road jarred my spine. I could almost hear the universe laughing at me, Hollywood's sweetheart to state property in a matter of months. A fall from grace so steep it could snap a man's neck on the way down. When the gates of Bartooth Prison opened, they groaned like some ancient beast being roused from sleep. Massive gray walls, watchtowers, razor wire that glinted like hungry teeth, this place wasn't designed for rehabilitation. It was designed to swallow whatever was left of you. The guards barely looked at me. To them, I wasn't a celebrity, a former actor, or even the guy who beat a director with a rock. I was just inmate 54192, another lost soul trudging into the maze. Inside, they processed me, strip search, delousing spray, orange jumpsuit, the whole dehumanizing carousel. Then a correctional officer with a deadpan face picked up a clipboard and said, Heller, cell block D, cell 214. Follow me. I did. Meeting Ryland Dixon. When the iron door of cell 214 slid open, I braced myself for whatever kind of monster I'd be shacked up with. Instead, a broad-shouldered guy with sandy hair and a faint scar across his brow looked up from a tattered paperback. He had prison fatigue in his eyes but something else too, an odd calmness. You must be the Hollywood guy, he said with a half grin, tossing the book aside. And you must be the welcoming committee, I muttered, stepping inside. He chuckled. Name's Ryland Dixon. I'm in for 10. Tried robbing a bank with 2 idiots who couldn't follow instructions. Now I get to enjoy all-inclusive Bartooth hospitality. Sounds like a terrible vacation package. Ain't that the damn truth? He extended a hand. I hesitated, old habits, old paranoia, but eventually shook it. Ryland nodded approvingly. Relax. I don't bite unless provoked. And you look like you've been through enough crap already. I beat a director with a rock. Well, he shrugged, Hollywood's had worse scandals. Besides, I heard the guy was a prick. I couldn't help but crack a tiny smile. He tapped the bunk above him. You can take the top. Hope you don't snore. I don't think I'll sleep enough to find out, I mumbled. First night's always rough, he said, stretching his arms behind his head. But you'll get used to it. Somehow, we all do. Marjorie's visit. A week passed before I got my first visitor. The guard escorted me into a concrete visitation room lined with thick plexiglass panels. Phones hung from the walls like relics from a broken world. I sat down, my heart thundering like a desperate animal. Then she appeared. Marjorie. Her hair tied back, her eyes red-rimmed from crying or lack of sleep, or both. She looked like the ghost of the woman I used to know. The one who whispered "I love you" before pinning me down and laughing with that goofy warmth that melted every icy part of me. She sat across from me and picked up the phone with trembling fingers. I lifted mine. For a moment, she just stared. Then, "Cody. I'm so sorry." The words cracked open something inside me. Something jagged. "I'm sorry too," I whispered. She shook her head. "No. No, let me say this. Please." Her voice was unsteady, fragile. "I shouldn't have said those things. When I told you I hoped you died, I didn't mean it. I was scared, I was angry, and you were spiraling so fast I couldn't keep up. I said the worst thing imaginable because I felt powerless to help you." I swallowed hard. The prison air felt suddenly heavy. "And when you told me to shut my mouth, when you curled your fists like you were ready to hit something, I panicked." She touched the glass lightly. "I should have been kinder. I should have walked away, not attacked you back. Marge, we were both high out of our minds. Meth made us demons." "No," she insisted softly. "We were still responsible for our words." Her eyes glistened. "I hurt you. And I'm sorry, Cody. Truly." Silence stretched between us like a wire pulled tight, fragile, tense, shimmering. "I never wanted this for you," she whispered. "Prison, a criminal record, a legacy shattered. I should have stopped you from going to meet Harvey. I should have grabbed you and held you down if I had to." I gave a humorless laugh. "That wouldn't have worked. When I'm high, even I can't stop me." Her lip quivered. "You deserved better than me in that moment." "No," I said quietly. "We were both drowning." She pressed her palm to the plexiglass. I mirrored her with my own. "Are you scared in here?" she asked. I didn't want to lie. "Yeah." She nodded slowly. "You'll survive this. You're stronger than you think." "I miss you," I admitted. "I miss you too." Then her voice dropped to a fragile whisper. "And when you get out, I'll be here. If you want me." My breath caught. I hadn't expected forgiveness. I hadn't expected love to remain in the rubble. "Yeah," I said softly. "I want you." The guard tapped his baton on the wall. Time was up. Marjorie pressed her forehead to the glass one last time. Tears traced down her cheeks. "I love you," she said. For the first time since the beating, since the drugs, since the trial. I felt something warm flicker in my chest. "I love you too," I whispered. And then she was gone, leaving only her warmth, her apology, and a sliver of hope inside my battered soul. Lunch at Bartooth was never meant to comfort anyone. The food looked like it had been scraped from the bottom of a sink drain and slapped onto a steel tray with all the grace of a sledgehammer. The mashed potatoes were lumpy, the carrots soft enough to pass for wet paper, and the bread could have doubled as construction material. I poked the carrots first, because getting the worst over with felt like a victory, pathetic as that was. Ryland sat across from me, shoveling potatoes into his mouth as if they were gourmet cuisine. "Eat," he muttered. "Hunger's worse than taste." I was about to reply when a shadow fell over our table. 3 men stood there. Not the average inmates, these guys looked carved out of concrete. Broad shoulders, shaved heads, tattoos that crawled up their necks like climbing vines. And every single one of those tattoos had one thing in common: white supremacist imagery, proudly displayed like trophies. The leader, tall, ice blue eyes, a spiderweb inked around his elbow, leaned forward. "You're Cody, right?" he asked. I didn't answer immediately. Ryland stiffened beside me. The man smirked. "Relax. If we wanted to stab you, we wouldn't open with introductions." That didn't make me feel any better. "Yeah," I finally said. "I'm Cody." "Name's Tanner Briggs," he replied. "Most people around here call me Briggsy. I run the Aryan front on this block." My stomach tightened, and it wasn't from the carrots. Briggs glanced at my tray. "Food sucks, huh?" "It's a culinary masterpiece," I deadpanned. He laughed, a sharp, barking sound. His two companions chuckled automatically, like trained hyenas. "We've been watching you," Briggs continued. "You came in hot. Famous guy. Got some fire in you. And you beat the shit out of someone on the outside. We respect that." Ryland's foot tapped against mine under the table, a silent warning, "Do not engage." Briggs rested both hands on the back of an empty chair. "Thing is, Cody knew guys don't last long without a group. And around here? Groups matter." He jerked his chin toward a nearby table where a handful of inmates glanced over. One had a swastika tattooed on his skull, another had a burning cross on his arm. "You're white," Briggs said. "And that's something you can't change. So why not use it to your advantage?" My throat tightened. He was offering protection. Protection with a price. "And what exactly would you expect from me?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. Briggs grinned. "Just loyalty. Nothing crazy. You eat with us, walk with us, keep your head on straight. If someone tries to jump you, Mexicans, blacks, anyone, we've got your back. And if things get ugly, you return the favor." Ryland shifted uncomfortably. "He's with me." Briggs barely acknowledged him. "No offense, Dixon, but one man ain't enough. This place is a hive. Sooner or later someone's gonna sting him." Briggs looked me over again, sizing me up like merchandise. "You can think about it," he said. "But don't think too long. People make assumptions fast in here. And assumptions can get a man gutted." His gaze hardened. "Cold. Certain." Then he tapped the edge of my tray with one finger. A soft clink. A warning disguised as casual courtesy. He and his two shadows walked off toward the other side of the cafeteria, where a cluster of white supremacists sat watching me like wolves sizing up a stray deer. Ryland leaned in close, whispering urgently. "Don't join them, Cody. Whatever you do. They're poison." "They seemed interested," I murmured. "That's the problem," Ryland hissed. "They want numbers. They want tools. You join them, they own you. Forever." My appetite died completely. I pushed the tray away. On the far side of the room, Briggs lifted his chin in a gesture that was almost a nod. Almost an invitation. Almost a threat. I realized then that prison wasn't just punishment. It was a chessboard. And I had just been marked as a potential piece. Chapter 15, I Speak to Tanner. The clang of metal echoed across the dim prison gym, that hollow, cavernous sound that always made my skin crawl. It was late, too late for anyone to be in there unless they were looking for trouble. The guards didn't bother patrolling this side of the yard after dark. They knew the routine: the weights were old, the benches rusted, and only idiots or predators hung around after hours. I guess that made me an idiot. Stress keeps you up. Meth ghosts keep you up longer. I was wiping sweat off my forehead when a hard shoulder slammed into me, nearly knocking the barbell from my hands. "Watch it," a voice snarled. I stiffened. Tanner. I didn't have to look to know it was him. The air around him always felt colder, like he dragged winter in on his breath. He towered over me, lean, defined, skin pale like he'd been carved out of bleached granite. His shaved head gleamed under the flickering fluorescence, and those icy blue eyes were the kind that made you believe some men were born without souls. I finally glanced up just enough to acknowledge him. "My bad," I muttered, though every muscle in my body wanted to recoil. He stepped closer. Too close. Close enough that I could smell the sweat and iron on him. "Didn't know you were lifting here," he said, voice low and taunting. "Thought you preferred the company of your pet nigger lover." I felt my jaw clench so tight it hurt. Ryland. He didn't deserve that. He didn't deserve any of this. But standing up for him meant one thing: getting stabbed before dawn. And for once in my life, I wasn't suicidal. I forced myself to breathe. Forced myself not to react. Forced myself not to give him the satisfaction. Tanner smirked at my silence, then turned his head just enough to tilt his chin toward the far corner of the gym. 3 men stood there watching us. Big men. Tattooed from neck to wrist. Most with shaved heads. All wearing smirks that were mirror images of Tanner's own. The Aryans. A whole damn flock of them. I swallowed hard. Tanner tapped my chest once with a single finger, light, but the message behind it felt like a hammer. "You been here long enough," he said. "Long enough to know how things work." He walked around me, circling like a shark testing a wounded seal. "You keep to yourself. That's fine. You ain't no snitch. That's good. You can fight when you need to, even better." He stopped behind me, breath brushing the back of my neck. My skin crawled. "But you got something else too." I didn't respond. "You got fire." I didn't know whether to laugh or run. He stepped around me until he stood directly in front of my bench, arms crossed, eyes drilling into mine. "We like fire. We can use it." I finally met his gaze fully, even though every instinct screamed not to. "Use it for what?" I asked quietly. Tanner's smile spread slowly across his face, like a stain. "Protection, first of all." He nodded to his crew. "You roll with us, nobody touches you. Nobody touches your cellmate neither." That hit me harder than the shoulder check. Ryland. They'd been circling him more lately. Calling him names. Throwing things. Testing boundaries. The kind of tests that escalate to violence. I knew it. They knew I knew it. And Tanner was dangling it in front of me like a poison treat. He leaned in slightly. "Second reason." His grin sharpened. "You're famous." My stomach dropped. "People see you with us, it sends a message. You ain't some washed-up junkie actor. You're one of ours. One of theirs." The thought made my spine shudder. I looked away for just a moment, scanning the gym. The cracked walls, the shadows, the half-broken equipment, it all suddenly felt smaller. Like I was standing in a shrinking room with no exit. Tanner took my silence as contemplation, not refusal. He clasped a hand onto my shoulder, gripping it tight enough that I could feel his fingerprints sink into my skin. "Think about it, Heller. You don't have to die in here." His voice dropped to a whisper. "But if you stay neutral?" He shrugged. "Neutral gets swallowed." He released me. Walked away. His crew followed, their boots pounding the gym floor as they disappeared into the dark hallway. I stood there alone, heartbeat pounding in my ears. Join them and become something I despised. Refuse them and endanger Ryland. The weights in my hands suddenly felt heavier than they ever had. I sat down on the bench, staring at the cracked concrete beneath my feet. No matter what I chose, I knew one thing. Prison wasn't going to let me leave clean. Not anymore. The cold steel bar rested above my chest, and I pushed it up with a shaky breath. 1, 2, 3. My arms trembled on the fourth rep, 150 pounds, laughable for most guys in here. But for me? It felt like lifting the entire damn world. I'd done this to myself. Years of drugs had carved me out like a rotting pumpkin. My muscles had shriveled. My stamina evaporated. My teeth, well, they were practically gravel at this point. Chipped, broken, yellowed. I used to forget brushing them for days on end because heroin had convinced me time didn't matter. Meth convinced me I was invincible until the mirror proved otherwise. Don't be like Staley, I remembered telling myself when I was 19 and terrified of dying young. Lane's voice echoed in my mind, that ghostly drawl from Get Born Again washing through the gym like an omen. It always gave me chills, those tortured notes that carried enough pain to fill a dozen lives. I promised myself I'd never spiral like that. That I wouldn't disappear into the hollow places addiction carved out. But addiction doesn't negotiate. Addiction doesn't listen to promises. It doesn't care if you idolize someone or pity them or swear to hell and back you'll never follow the same path. It only cares about the next high. The next numbness. The next lie you tell yourself to justify another hit. The bar dipped lower as my arms began to quiver violently. Sweat dripped down my forehead, stinging my cracked lips. Come on, I whispered through clenched teeth. Don't you dare give out on me now. I forced another rep, barely. The bar clanked into the rack with a sound that echoed like distant gunfire. My chest burned. My arms tingled. But worse than that, my thoughts spiraled. All the moments I said, "This is the last time." All the times I swore I'd quit. All the times I whispered promises into the void just to break them 20 minutes later. I wiped my face with a rough towel and stared at nothing. In that moment, I didn't feel strong. I didn't feel redeemed. Hell, I didn't even feel human. I felt like a ghost dragging around a body that had long since stopped being home. And Lane's voice kept haunting me in the background. I get born again. It was almost funny, in some dark twisted way. I wanted to be reborn. I wanted a clean slate. I wanted to scrape off everything I'd screwed up. But rebirth doesn't happen in a prison gym at 2 a.m. It starts with the hollow ache in your chest after benching a measly 150 pounds. It starts with realizing how far you've fallen. It starts with admitting that every lie you told yourself led you here. Prison wasn't the rebirth I imagined. But maybe, just maybe, it would force me to stop dying. Ryland stormed in like a man whose whole world had just been kicked apart. His face, normally calm, normally patient, looked like someone had carved hurt straight into it. His fists kept opening and closing, and his jaw twitched like he was trying not to scream. I sat up on the bench, wiped the sweat from my forehead, and frowned. "What's wrong, R?" I asked, already bracing myself. He didn't hesitate. "They took my Bible," he blurted, voice cracking down the middle. "How could they? Why would someone do that?" I blinked, stunned for a second. A shank? A pack of smokes? A couple bags of chips? Sure, those went missing every damn day. But a Bible? That was low even for this place. A Bible? I repeated, shaking my head. Seriously? Ryland wasn't just upset, he looked violated. The guy clung to that book like it was a life raft in a sinking ocean. In this hellhole, faith was the one thing nobody expected to be messed with. It was supposed to be off limits, sacred even to the bastards who pretended they didn't believe in anything. He ran a trembling hand over his shaved head, pacing in a tight circle. "It was right on my bunk," he muttered. "I left for 10 minutes, and when I came back it was gone. Just gone." His voice wavered. For Ryland, losing that Bible was like losing a limb. "I thought this place was bad," he whispered, eyes distant. "But I never thought someone would stoop that low." I didn't know what to say. This wasn't like when someone stole my toothpaste or shanked my pillow just because they were bored. This was something deeper. Something cruel for the sake of cruelty. You think it was Tanner? I asked quietly. Ryland swallowed hard. Probably one of his guys, he said. They've been on me for weeks. Calling me a nigger lover, telling me I'm not one of them, because I talk to you. Because I talk to anyone. He paused, chest rising and falling too fast. I don't care what they call me, he said, voice breaking again. But that Bible was all I had left. They knew that. I clenched my fists. Tanner and his gang had been needling Ryland for months. Insults. Threats. A shove here, a trip there. Just enough to remind him he wasn't safe, but not enough to get thrown in solitary. They were smart like that. I'm gonna get it back, Ryland said suddenly. I stood up fast. Hold on, don't do anything stupid. He turned to me with a gaze that was both fragile and furious. Cody, it's the only thing keeping me sane in here. And right then, I understood. Not because I believed in God. Not because I cared about the Bible. But because I knew what it was like to cling to something, anything, when the world had already taken too much from you. Ryland wasn't just upset. He was heartbroken. And someone was going to pay for that. Chapter 16, A Healthy Dose of Nutriloaf. The white supremacists had indeed taken Ryland's Bible. They used it like a makeshift tray for their cigarettes, flicking ash onto the cover and lighting each stick right on top of it. The prison's chaplain was furious when he heard, storming straight into the warden's office to lay it all out. The warden acted fast. His solution? Strip their meals down to pure Nutriloaf. What is Nutriloaf, exactly? It's the kind of prison food that sounds like it was invented during a budget crisis. Imagine a block of bread-like starch mixed with a handful of berries and whatever barely edible filler they can sweep off the kitchen floor. I've never tried it personally, but everyone says the same thing. It tastes like absolute dog's hit. I am not exaggerating. I should probably mention something critical about life in Bartooth. Everyone gets a job. A role. A tiny cog in the state's grand machine of punishment. Ryland worked in the laundry room folding uniforms stiff enough to slice skin. Tanner, of course, worked kitchen duty, perfect place to steal knives and sharpen spoons into weapons. And me? I hammered goddamn license plates for 12 hours a day. 12 hours a day. The same motion, the same clang, the same mind-numbing rhythm that made me want to bash my skull into the steel press just for a moment of silence. It was like being sentenced to the world's shittiest percussion band with no breaks and no audience. Every morning a guard handed me the hammer like it was some ceremonial relic. Heller. Try not to screw it up today. Every morning I bit my tongue so hard it practically bled. There were moments, when I imagined lifting that hammer and sending it flying straight into his skull like a fastball. Just one good throw. One satisfying thunk. But I liked the idea of eventually seeing daylight again, so I behaved. Mostly. The air in the license plate shop always smelled like burning metal and stale sweat. The machines screamed all day, and my arms shook constantly from the non-stop pounding. If rehab was supposed to be painful, this was apparently their idea of detox. Bang. 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 My hammer became the soundtrack of my punishment. I'd think about Marjorie sometimes, about home, about heroin, about anything that would make the time pass faster. Didn't matter. Time in there moved slower than syrup on a cold day. By the time work hours ended, my hands buzzed like a hornet's nest, and my back felt like someone had carved it with a dull blade. And that night, I dragged my exhausted, half-dead body into the gym only to find Ryland standing there, looking like someone had stolen the last piece of his soul. The missing Bible. The panic in his voice. The way his hope shattered in real time. That was the moment everything shifted. The moment the job, the hammering, the shitty meals, the 12-hour days, all of it blurred into background noise. Because Tanner and his buddies had decided to take something sacred. And in prison? That was war. I clenched my fists even as they ached from work. I said, voice tightening, we're getting your book back. For the first time since entering Bartooth, I meant every last syllable. And I didn't care whose shank I had to dodge to make it happen. I clenched my jaw so tight it threatened to snap. Tanner wasn't just a loudmouth. He was a calculated storm. One wrong move and I'd be sprawled on the floor with a shank buried somewhere inconvenient. And prison rules? They didn't protect the weak. They rewarded the clever, or the lucky. I thought about the stories Ryland had whispered in our cell, how Tanner had cornered a kid for mouthing off, how he'd carved threats into the wall with a sharpened spoon, how he walked out of solitary after a week like he hadn't just destroyed himself piece by piece. And nobody lifted a finger to help him. Not the guards. Not the warden. Not the other inmates. Only the cold, judgmental glare of the system that didn't give a damn about anyone. He had orchestrated his own end, and yet somehow, he survived. A hollow husk with pale blue eyes and a permanent scowl. He thrived on spite, the way he spat out insults at anyone who wasn't blonde and pale. He called Jewish prisoners kikes. He mocked the black ones for being soft. He was everything rotten in a body, and yet somehow, he commanded fear. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to lash out and tear him down. But the truth was, hating him too visibly would only make me a target. Every punch thrown in anger here had consequences. Every insult had consequences. Every step had consequences. So I kept my head down, my hammer swinging in the license plate shop, my mind spinning like a coiled spring. But the seed of revenge had been planted. I would get back at Tanner, yes. But I would be smart about it. Careful. Patient. I'd make sure it was him who fell into the trap, not me. And while I pondered the calculus of violence, I realized something even darker. In Bartooth, survival wasn't about morality. It wasn't about right or wrong. It was about being sharper than the monsters around you, and making sure the monsters didn't notice you until it was too late. Tanner didn't know it yet, but I was already planning my moves. Every step, every glance, every hammer strike, it was training. Preparation. One day, he'd look up, and it would be too late. Until then, I kept pounding metal, my arms trembling, my teeth gritted, my mind racing. Spite may have ruled the walls of Bartooth, but patience would be my weapon. And I intended to wield it with precision. Great job, kiddo. Marcus Stainer chirped, all sunshine in a place built out of shadows. His voice echoed off the concrete walls of the license plate shop, bouncing around like it didn't realize it had no business being cheerful in a prison. I forced a tight smile, but inside my stomach curdled. He reminded me way too much of Harvey Gilmore, that same fake enthusiasm, that same barely hidden jitter from relying on cheap caffeine to get through the day. The only difference was that here, in Bartooth, our cocaine tongue equivalent came from double-shot espressos the guards brewed in their break room. They handed them out sometimes to keep us from collapsing during our 12-hour shifts. They worked for about 2 hours. Then everything crashed, hard. As Marcus walked off, humming like we were in a Disney workshop instead of a prison, I wiped sweat from my forehead and stared at the metal plate clamped under my hammer. My hands were trembling again, not from withdrawal, but from boredom, exhaustion, and the persistent temptation scratching at the back of my skull. Meth. I hated that the thought even surfaced. I hated even more that it brought an echo of relief with it. For a second, I remembered the feeling, how the world sharpened, how colors stretched into hyperreality, how fury felt righteous instead of directionless. And how it turned me into someone who could break a man's nose and feel nothing but adrenaline for 15 straight minutes. It had made me a psychopath. It had made me dangerous. And worst of all, it had made everything feel easy. So I shoved the thought back into the locked box of things I refused to touch again. No more meth. No more losing control. Not here. Not around Tanner's gang. Not with Ryland counting on me to not go completely insane on him. I lifted the hammer again, my arms aching like hell. Clang. 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 Each strike felt like a heartbeat, like the rhythm of a life I never meant to fall into. But I kept going, because that's all you can do at Bartooth, keep going until something breaks. Preferably not yourself. Chapter 17, Marjorie and Orion. It had been a solid year since I was sentenced. Halfway there I thought. Marjorie popped by one Sunday afternoon, and she wasn't alone. In her arms was a gray and white tabby cat, blinking slow and sweet like it owned the place. How she managed to get a cat past prison security was beyond me, either the guards were asleep at the wheel, or she'd charmed the hell out of them. Probably the latter. But I wasn't about to complain. Not when I got to see her, my beautiful, soon-to-be wife. Every time she walked through those gates, some part of me believed in the future again.